Chapter 2015. Duque had forgotten how long it had been since he had last upgraded his equipment. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Ever since he had become a Breaking Dawn wizard, there were very few pieces of equipment that suited him. The equipment of Pharaoh from the world of Azeroth strengthened a wizard's strength in the form of additional magic circuits. For Duque, it was better not to have equipment that gave too little bonuses. After all, his movements would be even more restricted if he had more equipment. Pharaoh's powerful destructive power and fragile body were the most extreme contrast in the world. If he couldn't use magic to defend himself, he would die if he was hit by an enemy of the same level. This was especially so for Duque, who had transcended and entered the divine realm. If it wasn't a divine weapon, then everything else could only be used as decoration. Return of the Legion was also the time when planet Azeroth's self-defense consciousness was completely awakened. It would distribute the stored energy of the planet to those who were willing to protect it. This belt that was flashing with a holy orange glow was the most typical example. Duque was very sure that before the Burning Legion came, this item was definitely an epic-grade equipment in Nissandra's hands. Duque had been calling the planet's will, but he didn't get a response. She must be hesitating. Duque could understand that a true god at least held some supreme authority on this planet. Once the will of Azeroth was transferred, it couldn't be taken back. The consequences could be extremely serious, so heavy that even planet Azeroth itself couldn't bear it. Duque wasn't in a hurry. Anyway, before the planet confirmed that Sargeras had arrived, she had to give it to him no matter what. If Azeroth didn't give it to him, Duque wouldn't fight for it either. He would just be a quiet, handsome man. However, this belt was obviously a little reward for him. With a wave of his hand, the belt that was supported by the arcane elemental hand immediately flew into Duque's hand. The moment his palm touched the orange belt, a description popped up in his retina. Eternal Belt. The magic contained on it seems to be endless, just like the Burning Legion. It was simple violence and had no numerical value. In reality, equipment at the artifact level could no longer be quantified in terms of numbers. Just like the Tish, Guardian's legendary staff, that Duque was holding, if it was in the game, it would have been used as a decoration because its attributes could not keep up, or it would have been used to open a Karazhan portal to trap his teammates. But in this life, Duque had been using this drumstick, and he didn't feel like he couldn't keep up at all. A divine artifact that was suitable for oneself would bring a huge boost to any existence. It's a divine artifact. Isra was also a little surprised. This proves that Azeroth is getting anxious too. Duque took off the decorative belt that Aurelia sewed for him and put on the ribbon of eternity. The belt was blue in color, and there were 3 buckles that were connected together. In terms of aesthetics, this thing did not pass. In terms of effectiveness, Duque had to give it full marks. The ribbon of eternity, which was based on the Titan rune system, had power beyond Duque's imagination. It was true that Duque could connect to the weave, and in theory, as long as the 4 elemental realms of Azeroth were not destroyed, he had endless magic power. But in reality, it could not be calculated this way. Arcane magic, which was the Titan rune energy, was the basis for Duque to balance the various elements. What limited Duque's elemental magic was the arcane energy that could not be borrowed or absorbed. The ribbon of eternity is, of course, a little useless to the players in the game. After all, the special effect that required magic power to be less than 25% of the total was quite a pain in the ass. But in Duque's hands, it was a completely different concept. With the ribbon of eternity, Duque could directly control the total magic power of his demigod body by as much as 11%, which was quite a shocking number. This was not the limit. I'll charge it when I get out. As a peak demigod, Pharaoh did not need to slowly accumulate energy for something as simple as charging a divine weapon. If he was not in the Emerald Nightmare, Duque could fill this divine weapon to the brim and reach its maximum power in one go. Haha. Duque was in a good mood. He had not felt this way in a long time. Speaking of character, many African players in the game had not gotten what they wanted, even after countless versions. For example, those unlucky people who could not get the undead horse no matter what. Another example was an African warrior called Recruit, who had half of the skull of imprisonment of the Windchaser and could not get it even after many years, killing a random Nassandra and getting a divine weapon to pick up was really awesome. Beside himself, Duque subconsciously hugged the slender waist of the woman beside him and kissed her on the face. But wait, something was wrong. Looking at the pair of huge dragon horns and green hair, as well as the cute face that tilted her head, Duque realized that he had kissed the wrong person. Sorry, Isra. I was so happy that I got carried away. But Duke stammered, which was rare for him. It's okay. This is human etiquette to show friendliness. I saw Kalia and Alugia kissing each other's cheeks when they met, Isra said seriously. Duque was really shocked. Could I managed to hide it? I just kissed her like I was in the harem. I swear to God, I don't have any special feelings for Miss Isra. Yeah. Next, let's continue to look for the source of the corrosion. Yeah. I'll listen to you. Amazing. Amazing. Isra did not know if it was because Duque had killed a corrosive dragon's shadow with a slap that gave Isra a lot of confidence. Although her subordinate had died, she was still a little unhappy, but at least she had adjusted herself. The duty that was rooted in the heart of the dragon aspects was an iron law that could not be broken. Perhaps Isra would be sad, but in her heart, protecting the Emerald Dream was still her top priority. Duque waved his hand, and the surrounding scenery melted again. The scarlet scenery melted under a pair of huge flaming palms that appeared out of thin air. If it was a normal person who entered the Emerald Dream, they would have long been dizzy from the thick smell of corrosion. If they were not careful, even their minds would be easily corrupted, and then they would type GG amidst the laughter. Duque was different. The system had given him unparalleled analytical abilities. As long as he simply looked for the most turbid and dense area of dark energy, and then found the difference between the levels of corrosion in the turbulence, it would be easy to go against the flow and find the source of the corrosion. He gently pushed to the left and swung to the right. As if a new world had been opened, the next boss appeared in front of Duque and Isra. This is... Isra frowned. Ignis, the Heart of Corrosion. Chapter 2016. The Heart of Corrosion, Ignos, was a huge eyeball. His huge body could fit a frigate inside, and his ominous scarlet eyes would make an ordinary hero tremble in fear when they looked at him. As for Duque, I've even destroyed Thun. Who do you think you are? Just as Duque was about to make his move, the nightmare barrier on the left was suddenly pierced through. A huge spider-like monster charged into the battlefield. It looked very similar to the Mother Ashen spider that Duque had killed in the Land of Fire. It also had 6 legs and 2 huge front pincers. Its entire body was dark black, but the rest of its body glowed with a fiery red light. Duque knew that it was the other boss, Alarise, that could switch between spider and rock forms. Even Isra became alert after encountering 2 bosses at once, much less Duque. Duque, something's not right. It's just a normal reaction. The enemy isn't stupid. They won't line up and wait for me to kill them. Since they can't hide, they'll definitely choose to group up and see if they can kill me. This was like a minor character shouting, he's only one person. And trying to win with numbers was a sign of cowardice. Duque pursed his lips, but his expression was still calm, as if he was brushing off a speck of dust from his sleeves. There's no difference. I'll kill one and I'll kill 2. Just as Duque was showing off, the space fluctuated violently again. Space fluctuated violently again. This time, cracks appeared on the right side of the airdrop barrier. Crack, crack. It was a continuous explosion that sounded like glass shattering. Isra's green eyes suddenly narrowed, and a deep sadness appeared on his face. It was another familiar presence, Isendra, Amelise, Laythorn, and Taylor. Isendra, who had once been Isra's most loyal guardian, had changed beyond recognition. She had been corrupted by darkness and nightmares. If she was allowed to leave the Emerald Nightmare, it would only spread panic and chaos on the Azeroth continent. Her previous healing abilities were replaced by dark magic. She could release smoke-like lightning waves and summon demon druids. Isolde and her companions had the ability to hypnotize their enemies into their worst nightmares. Duque sighed. As a transmigrator, he had done his best. Many Fallen or Fallen Alliance experts in history had their fates unknowingly changed by him, obtaining salvation and a new life. There would always be some unlucky fellows who could avoid it once, but they couldn't avoid it forever. That was what happened to Xianxia and the other three. As the 4 emerald dragons that were supposed to have fallen during the Molten Core era, because of Duke's reminder, Isra discovered their tendency to fall in advance and forcefully straightened them out. It was a pity that the Green Dragon Army's power bonus in the Emerald Dream had become a poison that accelerated their corruption. They were used to absorbing energy from the Emerald Dream, and when the Emerald Dream was contaminated, they were also corrupted into nightmare dragons. If Duke hadn't interfered, Isra would probably be the same. Seeing her subordinates and companions that had accompanied her for more than 25,000 years degenerate into hideous forms, Isra was heartbroken. She didn't want Duke to see her sad look, so she lowered her head, her chin almost touching her chest. Duke, give them relief. But just like when a paladin fell into a death knight, his power was definitely stronger than that of an ordinary expert. Once an ancient dragon that guarded the Emerald Dream was corrupted, the danger it posed would increase exponentially. Duke scanned his surroundings. When he combined his spiritual sense with the system's scanning, he was a little surprised to find that the fallen bear god Ushik, who was supposed to be a member of the Emerald Nightmare Dungeon, was not here. After thinking about it for a while, he felt relieved. The original Bear Monster brothers had their souls freed by mortal heroes under the decaying world tree. But that relief was only temporary. The place where their souls returned to was the Emerald Dream where demigod souls could be stored. Thus, in history, when the Emerald Dream became a nightmare, the poor bear demon demigod also fell. In this life, Ushik and Ushik were working under Duke. Even their soul source had been transferred into the weave, allowing the 2 brothers to escape a calamity. In addition, the king of nightmares, Savis, was already done for. If there were no accidents, the Emerald Nightmare should be the only boss left. Is everyone here? If so, then let's end this. Duke snapped his fingers. For some reason, he just wanted to snap his fingers. Perhaps this represented acting cool. In reality, there was a deeper reason here. This was the Emerald Dream, a place where one could visualize things when one's spiritual force was used to the extreme. From the start, using some element to forcefully break into this space to destroy the enemy was not wrong, but it was definitely a thankless effort. Isra was indescribably shocked. She never thought that an outsider like Duke, after asking her how to use the Emerald Dream for a while, would actually master the trick of this special space in such a short time. Z's strange sound. A thick beam of golden light burst out from the ground, piercing through the heavens and penetrating the earth. As a witness at the center of the beam of light, Isra had no words to describe the terror of this attack. That control was too precise. She had never seen a light cannon that could be hollow. When the light cannon shot out, it created a small hollow area, which was like the eye of a tornado. No matter how strong the winds howled outside and engulfed the world, the interior was peaceful and quiet. It was precisely because Duke, the controller, was completely unscathed. The light cannon hit where the 6 huge bosses were. Originally, there were 6 gigantic monsters, but now, from 6 different directions, they formed a circle and firmly surrounded the 2 of them. Who knew that this thick ring of light cannon would directly cover the area where each boss was? The golden ring of light cannons broke through the ground, hit the relatively soft lower abdomen of each boss, the beam of light pierced through the sky, and the bodies of the 6 bosses began to dissipate within the ring of light. All of this took only a breath's time. It couldn't be said to be as fast as lightning, but it was still frighteningly fast. Isra estimated that even with her full reflexes, she would not be able to react in time. The most she could do was create an instant defensive barrier, and the rest could only rely on her powerful dragon body to resist. But the more she witnessed it as a bystander, the more shocked Isra felt. She subconsciously squinted against the strong light, and involuntarily held onto Duke's arm tighter. Bang! There was a sound that was completely different from the explosion in the real world. The attack that Duke summoned was like a new Ungoro crater in the Emerald Nightmare. Chapter 2017. Isra seemed to have lost the ability to express herself. This scene was too shocking, so shocking that it couldn't be any more shocking. She had been in charge of the Emerald Dream for 25,000 years. She never knew that such a terrifying move could be used in a spiritual world like the Emerald Dream. It's like, Isra mumbled, the main cannon of the fortress of the universe, isn't it? Duque gave Isra a confident smile. Yes. Isra couldn't help but nod. Looking at the scene of the ashes, Duque felt like he was dragging a literary girl to an art gallery to admire some rare masterpiece. If this was considered art, it should be a kind of performance art or the art of battle. Duque chuckled. It doesn't matter if it's the Emerald Dream or the Nightmare. At the end of the day, it's a world of spiritual materialization. Imagination is the most powerful weapon. As long as the spiritual power in your body can keep up with the power of the weapon you imagine, then your dream will come true. That's right. Here, as long as a mortal believes that he is dead, then he will definitely die in reality. This law applies to all existences in this spiritual world. Even the leader-tier monsters in the Emerald Nightmare, if their minds believe that they will perish, then they will naturally perish. Duke gently led Isra forward, taking a leisurely stroll. As he walked, he admired the 6 giant leader monsters of the nightmare. In the seemingly dazzling but actually extremely gentle golden light, they were reduced to ashes. The shock on Isra's face had yet to fade. Every existence with demigod-level spiritual power had the possibility to fire a similar light cannon here. But Isra knew that there was not a single one who could do what Duque did. Just like the god of the wilderness, they had this kind of potential. But their extremely primitive life experience meant that they would not be able to imagine themselves using such a killer move. Without imagination, there was no higher possibility. If it were the raven goddess Iwina or the turtle god Tatora, they would probably be tortured to death by these 6 leader monsters in a few moves. In terms of imagination, Duque was absolutely different from them. His experience determined that he had more room to display his abilities in a space where his mind could be materialized. Isra let out a long sigh. I was right about you. Duque naturally put a hand on the back of Isra's hand. Yes, so you can trust me more. This time, it was Isra who laughed. Do I not trust you enough? When I was about to die, the first person I thought of was you. Duque was about to say something when he suddenly fell silent. As a transmigrator, he originally had no feelings for the remaining 1 or 2. They felt that he was no different from the other bosses. However, when the emotions of the people around him were mixed in, everything became different. Duque, please save Malfurion. Tyron's words echoed in Duque's ears. As the leader of the Night Elves, Tyron had to control the situation. The Night Elves had a vast territory. Although they did not fight for every inch of it, they could not allow the Burning Legion to open teleportation gates in their territory. Tyrant could not leave, so she could only entrust the task of saving her childhood friend to Duque. To be honest, Duque did not feel uncomfortable about saving Malfurion. After all, this great druid with antlers on his head and his signature green grassland hat was definitely a good person. In this life, after knowing that Tyrant's heart belonged to someone else, Malfurion withdrew and continued to support Tyrant's work silently. Duque felt that Cenarius was the one who was troubled. In the past, when Cenarius was hacked to death by Grandpa Roar's axe, Duque would only laugh. But now, not only had Cenarius been corrupted by the Jade Nightmare, his foster mother was holding Duque's hand. This kind of bastard was simply speechless. Isra, let me tell you. Just as Duque was about to tell her the results of the system's scan, the entire world suddenly shook. A red dot appeared in the air. In the blink of an eye, an ominous crimson color once again filled the vision of the man and dragon. Evil was spreading, and the rot was expanding endlessly. In the center of all the crazy nightmare aura, a four-legged centaur with the lower body of a horse appeared. His body was tall and wild. On his lower body, on the horse's back, on his shoulders, and on his enormous antlers, there were many fiery red things that looked like crystal wristlets. As he walked, these fiery red crystals were like burning flames, trembling non-stop. Even his hair had turned from green to a muddy red. Izura covered her mouth. She couldn't believe her eyes. No, she had already expected this. Before seeing it with her own eyes, she had always held onto a tiny, tiny hope. At this moment, all hope was gone. Sina. Julius. Izura's voice sounded like she was in a dream. The corrosion of the emerald dream was too much for her. She felt like she had fallen into an eternal nightmare, unable to wake up no matter what. Izura, actually I can? Duque, who had forgotten about this, did not know how to comfort Izura. No, Duque, you have already helped me too much. Izura raised her beautiful face, 2 drops of tears already falling from the corners of her eyes. Some things can only be done by oneself. No other existence can help. Duque could only respond in silence. 25,000 years. That's a really long time. As his adoptive mother, I watched him grow up. I watched him develop his own beliefs and become the spiritual leader of the Cenarian Circle. Maybe this is war. Izura's face was full of sadness. Then she gave Duque a smile that looked like she was laughing but was actually crying. Under Duque's gaze, she began to activate the ultimate transformation spell. In just 2 seconds, she changed back to her original form, that beautiful green dragon. Wait, the description of a dragon did not seem to match the current Izura's name. The size was obviously wrong. At this moment, the dragon Izura was only less than 20 meters with her wings spread out. Her body was only about 15 meters long. To humans, she was still a giant. To Cenarius, who had expanded like an inflatable balloon under the power of the shapeshifters, Izura's body was not enough, and even a little weak. It had been proven countless times that dragons did not have an advantage in close combat among creatures of the same body size. Normally, Izura could of course use all kinds of magic or special spiritual attacks to torture her opponent to the point where they could not live and could not die. The problem was that Izura's soul had just been heavily injured. Chapter 2018. Are you all right? Duque asked hesitantly. Regardless of whether I'm all right or not, this is my duty. Duque, you deal with the last enemy. Duque turned his head and instantly saw the void on his right explode. In that void, space shattered like broken glass, revealing a giant monster with an inverted triangular upper body. This head was more devilish, with the common curved goat horns that demons had. That burly body made it look a little like a barbarian soldier from the Burning Legion. It was a big monster like this. No matter how one looked at it, it didn't match the elegant and violent profession of Pharaoh. Others didn't know, but Duque obviously knew who it was. The system had marked everything. Duque suddenly felt bored. Savis, it's Savis again. Ever since the ancient war, he had toyed with this guy and ordered him around like a little brother. Later on, he had tried to cause trouble many times, but he had failed and ended up being destroyed. In the previous timeline, this guy had been tricked to death, and even a large part of his soul had been destroyed. At that time, the treacherous, cowardly Enzos hadn't run out to pick up his remaining bones. To be honest, Duque had been worried about this and that in the past. But after becoming stronger, Duque looked down on Enzos. Other than scheming and causing trouble, this guy had never dared to jump out and fight head-on. When Enzos' flawless schemes in history were repeated again and again in front of Duque, this transmigrator, Duque just wanted to yawn and say, "Are you done yet?" Others might fear Savi's title of King of Nightmares. Unfortunately, in this life, Savi's power had been greatly reduced. His scheme had failed once, and this title of King was really lacking. Without the support of a powerful soul, Enzos could only create this toy-like giant and stuff Savi's remnant soul into it to make up the numbers. Under the system's scan, Savi's remnant soul wasn't even 5% of its peak. The seemingly huge soul was filled with a large amount of soul residue from other unknown creatures. Marcus, I'm back. Sticking out his long tongue, he obviously looked like a demon, but Duque felt that he looked like a hanged ghost from the Celestial Empire, whose tongue was being strangled by an invisible rope. Sai, I kill you every time. I'm embarrassed. I'll give you some special benefits this time. Duque snapped his fingers. Sarvis was instantly dumbfounded. Because a female titan appeared. No matter how large a giant's body was, if it didn't have a corresponding physique or special ability, it would only be a live target on the battlefield. Even if all the giant-sized guardians of Azeroth were to appear in front of Savi's, who had an incomplete soul, he would not be afraid, let alone a female giantess. They would most likely howl and charge forward to chop him down. She was definitely an exception. Because she was impressively Queen Azhara. That pair of long legs that took up at least 60% of her total height, that slender waist, that chest that was at least a ton. Cough cough. Although it was a female titan with a height of 30 stories, the proportions of her body and appearance were 100% the original. Savi's was dumbfounded. Savi's, my loyal servant, kneel. The exact same voice, the exact same eyes, the exact same aura. If it wasn't for the fact that this Queen Azhara's size was really wrong, Savi's would definitely have thought that this was the Empress herself. Savi's thick neck seemed to be rusted to death. He turned his head with difficulty and looked at Duque. His expression was unknown, whether it was anger, pain, or sorrow. Duke Marcus, you're messing with me? That's right. I'm messing with you. Duque was very happy to be mischievous. At this moment, the giant version of Queen Azhara spoke again. Savi's, if you yield, I can consider letting you be my guest in the bedroom. Savi's originally small soul suddenly became incomparably messed up. Before the War of the Ancients, Savi's had already served the queen for close to 10,000 years. Even though Queen Azhara was arrogant and silly, she was publicly recognized as the #1 beauty among the night elves back then. Of course, that completely blue skin was something Dumuk couldn't accept in the past. Ever since he accidentally slapped her hooves, it didn't seem so unsightly anymore. However, even an outsider like Duque could clearly feel Savi's crazy love for the queen. Speaking of which, there weren't many males among the night elves who didn't like Queen Azhara. Perhaps the Stormrage brothers were an exception. It wasn't that Queen Azhara didn't know, but she was used to using her beauty to manipulate her admirers, making them risk their lives for her, and toying with all the big bosses in the palm of her hand. It was precisely this habit that gave her the confidence to think that she could capture the heart of the fallen titan Sargeras. Sigh, who knew that Sargeras would have such a heavy taste? He liked female orcs like Garona who could smash watermelons with their pectoral muscles. Other than his master Enzos, Savi's wasn't afraid of anyone. Now, it seemed that he had to add Queen Azhara to the mix. The real Queen Azhara was still alive and kicking in the Broken Islands, so she naturally wouldn't come here to spoil things. This was what Duque was doing with the Emerald Nightmare's characteristics. Don't you like your queen very much? Come on. Pretentious. Create trouble. I announce in the name of the queen that you are going to become a masochist. Savi's was about 8 stories tall at the moment. To a human, he was definitely a giant. But in front of Queen Azhara, who was controlled by Duque and was purely spiritual materialization, he was like a ball. A pair of long, blue legs stomped down on him. Savi's collapsed on the spot. Your Majesty, no. Duque used the system to project the Azhara in his memory, and then he controlled the female giant Azhara to abuse Savi's. After a few rounds, Duque was absolutely sure that this guy was an incurable foot fetish, queen fetish, masochist. Perhaps he had really played a similar unspeakable game with Azhara in the past. Anyway, after a series of Queen's Trample and Queen's Whip, Savi's typed GG amidst the laughter. This guy actually had a satisfied smile on his face before he died. Duque held his forehead. Did I do something wrong? Savi's remnant soul, which had been infused with Enzo's evil divine power, was definitely not weak, but Duque had grasped his greatest weakness. Every piece of Savi's soul was branded with a twisted love for Azhara, which caused his already incomplete soul to become even more unstable. After a few rounds, like a sand sculpture on the beach being washed away by the waves, Savi's remnant shadow collapsed. Yes, it was indeed a sand sculpture. Everyone repeat after me, sand sculpture. Chapter 2019. Duque felt that Enzos was extremely annoying. Disgusting, sinister, despicable, stabbing me in the back. What does it have to do with Enzos that the Burning Legion wants to destroy the world? Wake up, the Qing dynasty has already perished. Oh no, your darkness empire has already perished for 25,000 years. What old and young? They just couldn't see reality clearly. Back then, Sargeras was able to destroy you ancient gods once. Even if he's not representing the pantheon now, do you think he'll share this planet with you, Enzos? He had no idea what Enzos was doing here. However, it was clear that the corrosive jadeite dream was an important part of Enzos' grand scheme. If it wasn't for the system scan, Duque would never have known that Savi's afterimage actually contained a massive amount of decaying energy. This amount was probably enough to pollute the Emerald Dream 10 times over. If by any chance Duque was really foolish enough to go up and fight Savi's, then after beating Savi's up in minutes, what awaited him was self-destruction. After Savi's enlarged, his big belly was filled with highly concentrated pus. They were all contaminants on the mental plane. Once he encountered it, it would be 10,000 times worse than indoctrinating a little girl who believes in Santa Claus into Japanese action movies. If Duque really touched it himself, he would be brainwashed like his good comrade, Earth Guardian Nesario, in minutes. If Duque didn't take the bait, Enzo's fishing tactic naturally wouldn't work. When a certain someone used the smallest price to defeat the final boss of Savi's afterimage, he then broke through another situation. On the other side, Isra was almost kneeling. Isra tried his best to swing his claws, but he could not stop Cenarius' attack. No, dammy, tentacle play was really exciting. If not for the fact that Isra was still in his dragon form, even the most perverted bards wouldn't dare to describe this scene. It was just as Duque had predicted. Isra was at an absolute disadvantage. Due to the damage to his soul, he was unable to use dream magic, so Isra could only fight like the progenitor dragon. Unfortunately, after shrinking in size, all of her claws, tail strikes, wing strikes, and even dragon bites became much less powerful. The only bright spot was that Isra's dragon breath of nature had actually purified many of Cenarius' summoned creatures. There were a few dryads who had been purified, the forest sisters who were deer and knew some nature magic, and Malfurion. Duque didn't expect that Malfurion would come here. He had no time to ask why Malfurion was here. After all, according to the system, Malfurion was only at half health, and he still had a lot of magic power. As long as a great druid with a huge amount of mana still had a breath left in him, he would be able to replenish his HP and recover in no time. Duque raised his hand and a huge ice shield blocked the thorns that Cenarius threw at Malfurion. Malfurion was stunned. He then saw Duque and nodded at Duque. Duke no longer cared about the great druid with the oily green head and turned to attack Cenarius. Corrosion. Madness. Only nightmares are eternal. Cenarius raised his hands and shouted a bunch of nonsense unique to psychopaths. Duque didn't feel anything. As a modern industrialist, he was destined to never be in the same boat as a naturalist. With a thought, dozens of flame blades appeared out of thin air and slashed at the tentacles and thorns that the fallen Cenarius had created. The next second, Duque was shocked. The flames were very effective against the rotten tentacles and vines. They burned off the tentacles that wrapped around Isra in the blink of an eye. But in less than 1/100th of a second, more rotten vines grew out of thin air and continued to wrap around Isra's body, getting tighter and tighter. Isra's neck was suffocating. Transform! Duque shouted. No, Isra refused. Turning into a human meant that she had given up this battle forever. Cenarius had a special meaning to her. He's not Cenarius. Duque suddenly added. He's... Isra was so shocked that she even forgot to struggle. Yo, Enzos, you're finally willing to show up? Even if it's just a small part. Duque sneered at the seemingly violent Cenarius who kept using dark plant magic. Time seemed to freeze. Isra was the former master of this world after all. She began to use her strongest senses to examine this fallen, adopted son, in front of her. The next moment, without even greeting Duque, her still huge body suddenly shrunk. Duke didn't let Isra's decision go to waste. With a stretch of his hand, a mage's hand larger than a human appeared out of thin air and pulled Isra back into his night elf form. Almost as soon as she was pulled into Duque's arms, Isra collapsed again. As expected, fighting with a damaged soul was too much of a burden for her. On the other side, Cenarius had a stunned expression on his face, and then he laughed sinisterly. How interesting. Duke Marcus, I'm really getting more and more interested in you. His voice became extremely deep and thick, like thunder, like a drum, and even more so had a coldness that transcended the mortal world. It was a lofty arrogance that looked down on all life in the world. Enzos, this is our first greeting. I thought you would hide in a dark corner forever and not come out. Duque held Isra, who was panting heavily from exhaustion, and stared at Cenarius, who had Enzos will attached to him. Cenarius shook the huge index finger of his right hand. No. According to you humans, I'm a chess player. For a chess player to be reduced to being a chess piece, isn't that a bit too degrading? What you said makes a lot of sense. Do I need your autograph? Hee. Duque turned on his mocking mode. Do you think Sardras will treat you as a chess player? Enzos was speechless. As an ancient god, he thought highly of himself and looked down on everyone. Apart from occasionally colluding with his old companions who were also ancient gods, Enzos really hadn't been happy with anyone. In the era of the Dark Empire, the various ancient gods didn't give in to each other and fought each other. As for Sardras, it would be a lie to say that he didn't hate him. The descent of the Pantheon had destroyed the dreams of the ancient gods. Even if Sardras had fallen, would Sardras look up to Enzos, who had lost to him in the past? The one who understood someone the most was definitely their enemy. Chapter 2020. According to Sardras's personality, even if he cleared out all the righteous forces on Azeroth, he would still pull Enzoth out of the planet's core and beat him up. Zotha's turtle-like fighting style was meaningless against Sardras. Duque and the rest couldn't possibly tear down Azeroth and turn it upside down to drag him out. Sardras was different. At most, he would blow up the entire planet after he got his hands on the good stuff on Azeroth. And Zoth was rendered speechless by Duque. In any case, he already knew that he couldn't do anything to Duque this time. Therefore, he didn't even reply and retreated cleanly. He didn't even say anything harsh. Without a sound, he let his remaining consciousness withdraw from Cenarius's body. My brother Enzo, a ruthless god, doesn't talk much. Almost as soon as Enzotha's consciousness left, the fallen Cenarius charged over like a wild horse with an anus prolapse. Duque really wanted to describe this fallen demigod in the form of a centaur or something. Unfortunately, Cenarius was howling as if he was on steroids. As he ran, he left behind large clumps of corrosive substances. These were all the rotten substances that were originally sealed in his body to increase his power of corruption. But once Enzoth left in order to discuss Duque, he pulled out a plug. Cenarius charged forward while leaving behind a pile of things. Not only were there green and yellow smelly pollutants, but there were also things that looked like internal organs. This was clearly an anus prolapse. Sigh, what rotten land, rotten world, I hate coming to places like this the most. Duque's left hand carried the half-collapsed Isra. He raised his right hand's middle finger and index finger. A spark appeared. In half a second, in this world where one could do whatever they wanted as long as they had enough mental strength and imagination, a monstrous fire was ignited. From the edge of his field of vision to the front of Duque's feet, as long as he looked in the direction of Cenarius, all he could see were blazing flames. Endless flames that connected the sky and the sun. Burn your demigod, Motherf asterisk Ker. The fallen Cenarius continued to shout, shouting words that even he himself did not know what they were. However, the sea of fire quickly caught up to him, burning his four legs that were oozing pus and igniting his shoulders and antlers that were covered in fiery red crystal clusters. Wow. Pairs of flaming hands appeared one after another, clawing at Cenarius' body. Almost every claw tore off large chunks of rotten flesh from his body, rapidly charring the wounds. However, new flaming hands grabbed at the huge Cenarius, rapidly roasting him. It was a charge of death. After a few steps, Cenarius lost his balance and fell to the ground. That was the bad thing about four-legged guys who were too big. Once their legs were broken, they would be dead on the spot. He randomly summoned rotten thorns and other messy things in an attempt to attack Duque. Unfortunately, he couldn't, and neither could his summons. As a demigod with a strong inclination towards support, his greatest characteristic was his ability to reduce energy consumption. When the enemy's attack exceeded his recovery ability, his defense could ignore his attack methods. In that case, the title of Tire Killer would lose its meaning. Xianxia was still struggling in vain, but his cries made Isra tremble. Malfurion, who was watching this scene from afar, felt sad. The great druid knelt on the ground. He looked blankly at Xianxia, who was struggling in the sea of flames and walking towards death. The fall and death of Xianxia was definitely a huge blow to the druid sect. The first time he was killed by Grom's axe, it could still be said that Xianxia wasn't a battle-type demigod. But this fall would directly affect all the druids in the Xianxian circle. Malfurion suddenly felt lost and emotional about the unknown road ahead. He looked at Isra, who was crying softly on Duque's shoulder, and thought to himself, I'm afraid the future of the druids will fall on the Green Dragon Queen's shoulders. The death of the fallen Xianxia symbolized the collapse of the last point of corrosion in the Emerald Nightmare. In the entire dream world, whirlpools of various sizes suddenly appeared in countless places. These whirlpools sucked in all the corrosive things. At a speed visible to the naked eye, the Emerald Dream was recovering. Duque sighed. This was the Emerald Dream, the magical spiritual world left behind by the Titans, the natural blueprint of Azeroth. Without the source of corrosion interfering, the Emerald Dream's own recovery ability was enough. There was no need for external forces to restore it. Historically, after defeating Savis, when Elun took away Isra's purified soul, the Emerald Dream recovered its beauty. Although this battle had started anticlimactic, the key was that Duque had cut off the possibility of the corrosion spreading further at the first opportunity. When Duque saved Isra, it meant that N'Zoth could not destroy the entire Emerald Dream at the fastest speed possible. This was the key of all. Duque suddenly noticed that there was a brilliant orange glow on Xianxia's charred remains that dissipated with the wind. He was no stranger to this glow, but he did not expect that he would be so lucky as to obtain another divine artifact. With a wave of his hand, the magician's hand naturally helped him pick up the item. Norganon's foresight, a pair of divine-made shoes. Magic should be regulated, managed, and controlled. At the same time, it should be understood and cherished, not left on the shelf. You must thoroughly understand this contradiction. This inscription carved in the Titan language on the heel of the shoe sounded quite sophisticated. Duque did not care. At his level, he already had his own unique understanding of magic. What Duque really valued was the speed of elemental condensation provided by this pair of divine artifact shoes. The Titan rune magic circle attached to it had a tactic that could gather arcane and other elements at a higher speed. This tactic was like the Alliance's army, which was still using diesel as fuel, suddenly being upgraded to the level of small-scale nuclear power. The magnitude of the improvement was obvious. As expected, a divine artifact related to the Pantheon Titan was awesome. Almost as soon as the divine artifact shoes were in his hands, Duque subconsciously wanted to kiss the beauty in his arms. This time, Duque braked. There was no way. Malfurion, that third wheel, was still watching. Go back, Duque said. Although weak, Isra said resolutely, Go back? Go back where? This is my duty, the Emerald Dream that I swore to protect with my soul and life. You have to at least recover. Duque interrupted her. You've already cut off your connection with the Emerald Dream. And do you think that N'Zoth really left without leaving any spies in the Emerald Dream? Don't be naive. He can still invade this place when you're at your peak. You're so weak now. As soon as I leave, you'll fall. This time, the Emerald Dream is really finished. Chapter 2021. In theory, Isra would recover the fastest if she stayed in the Emerald Dream. However, the defense of the Emerald Dream was weak and useless. N'Zoth was a troublemaker. As long as Duque dared to leave, Isra would be left alone. Next time, Isra and the Emerald Dream would be destroyed together. Isra was completely stunned. She never thought that one day, it would be her, the King of Dreams. Leaving the Emerald Dream would be the best way to deal with this place. The guilt of wanting to fulfill her duty, but having to abandon it, almost made her break down. Alright, maybe you're right. I'll go discuss it with my sister. Isra lowered her head. Then, do you have any suggestions on how to quickly recover from soul damage? Duque was stuck. His own physique was definitely a wonder. He could absorb other soul elements and turn them into his own soul without destroying the essence of his own soul. He seemed to be the only one in the world. Isra, you should go talk to Elune. Alright. Duque first opened a portal and sent Isra back to the Sleeping Dragon Temple. Then he brought Malfurion back to Darnassus and handed him over to Tyrande at the Moon Goddess Temple. Seeing her childhood friend return safely, Tyrande was very happy. Oh, Duque, thank you so much. Ever since Tyrande stepped down as High Priestess and gave the position to Chandris, she continued to rule the Night Elves as Elune's representative. Tyrande had been freed from many restraints. As long as it was not a public occasion, she did not mind showing off her close relationship with Duque. Right in front of Malfurion, Tyrande generously kissed him. Malfurion was already used to it. There was no loneliness, only calmness. Lord Marcus, thank you again for your help. The Cenarian Circle still needs me, so I'll take my leave first. You guys continue. Malfurion bowed and left. Tyrande, who had gotten carried away, felt a little embarrassed. Only the two of them were left. Duque briefly explained the situation in the Emerald Dream. Has Cenarius finally fallen? Yes. Tyrande let out a long sigh. Fortunately, we managed to avoid the worst. However, the Green Dragon army was also half destroyed. To maintain the anti-Titan circle, Isra's dragon aspects were indispensable. I hope she can recover soon. Faced with this result, Duque also had a headache. Enzos had definitely gone overboard this time. What good would destroying the anti-Titan array formation do him? This was practically lighting up the latrine, looking for shit. Now that Boss Saw was here, he wouldn't have it easy either. Did he really think that the Justice faction was stronger than the Burning Legion? He really didn't know how the brains of these ancient gods worked. Are there any other opportunities? I feel like we're being too passive. Tyrande's words made sense. Duque was also having a headache. The war on the Broken Islands had been progressing steadily. The Alliance began to build frontline bases in all directions of the islands. However, the battle situation had always been at a stalemate. For every meter that the front line was pushed forward, they had to pay the price of dozens or even hundreds of soldiers' lives. Outside the Broken Islands, the entire world was mobilized. Almost 24 hours a day, the various B squadrons were in a state of exhaustion, busy intercepting the Burning Legion's assault battleships and planet destroyers. The opportunity is coming. I believe the Pantheon won't miss this. There were as many things to do as a mountain. Duque returned to Karazhan first. Even though he was able to destroy everything in the Emerald Nightmare, those ultimate moves were quite taxing on him. This wasn't like in the game. After using up all his mental power, it would not affect him at all. He could slowly replenish it himself. This was just like when he was immortal, he could pull 2 all-nighters in a row. Phew. Vanessa, I just finished dealing with the Jade Nightmare and had a confrontation with an Zos. I'm exhausted. Rest for a while. Don't call me if there's nothing major about the front line collapsing. Yes, I understand, Master. Ever since entering this time, Vanessa had become much more obedient. She was no longer the little girl who often threw tantrums. Demigods were not invincible. Even with a demigod's body, they would still die. Cenarius's death shook the entire Alliance camp. A few years ago, when Vanessa realized that the fate of the entire Alliance and even the entire Azeroth rested on Duque's seemingly delicate shoulders, her attitude towards Duque had become much better. Duque fell asleep. It was rare for him to sleep not out of habit, but out of an instinctive need as a living creature. Just like the gods of the wilderness who recovered themselves after their life destruction in the Emerald Dream. As he fell asleep, Duque vaguely felt a woman who was not unfamiliar come over to him. What a nice smell. Duque didn't care and hugged her like a human pillow. When Duque woke up after sleeping for a day and a night, he was covered in cold sweat. 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 A waterfall of sweat. Oh my, why is it Isra? He had to say that the ultimate transformation spell was amazing. Although Isra was still in the human form that Duque was familiar with, without the iconic dragon horns and the facial lines that Duque didn't like, other than the long ears and eyebrows, Isra was no different from a human. Much more pleasing to the eye. But why did you come to my place? You're awake? Good morning. Oh, good evening. Isra's voice was still as pleasant as ever. By the way, this is my bedroom, my bed, right? Just in case, Duque confirmed the surroundings. That's right. Then why did you come here? Duque was too embarrassed. Because it was too convenient, he had his arm around her shoulder and his claws were on her waist. No, I had something to talk to you about. Chapter 2022. What did a dragon's tongue feel like? Duque was one of the few people in the world with experience. He just wanted to say that a dragon's tongue that could lengthen when needed and was extremely flexible was definitely a bug. Normally, no ordinary person would put their limbs into a dragon's mouth. What was the difference between that and sending food? But thinking about it, this was very similar to circus performers putting their heads and hands into the mouths of lions and crocodiles. The rapid secretion of adrenaline. The kind of anxiety where your heart instantly accelerated to 200 beats per minute and your life was hanging by a thread. It was so exciting. Even though he knew that Isra wouldn't harm him, Duque couldn't help but get excited first. And this dragon's tongue wasn't the usual dragon's tongue. Unlike Xianxia, who had been tamed countless times, Isra came on her own. That soft touch, mixed with the feeling of a soft girl like Kalia and the forbidden pleasure of conquering a dragon, made Duque a little unable to take it anymore. Yeah. Chirp chirp. Isra responded to Duque immaturely. After a long time, Duque finally escaped from the dragon's mouth. Isra, this seems... Actually, Duque was using what little rationality and integrity he had left to support himself. He felt that it wasn't good. Although it seemed very fair for a hero to save a damsel in distress, she was Isra, the Green Dragon King. It just felt a little weird. Isra tilted her head and revealed a sweet yet adorable expression. No wonder Oni said that you're a swordsman. Swordsman? Damn. Wait, did that guy really say that? You actually asked her about me? God, what are you guys thinking? Isra didn't answer Duque. She directly used her ultimate move. Teasing the sword. This was no longer teasing. She started with a dragon tongue. Damn. So exciting. With his life hanging by a thread, Duque struggled with all his might, pressing the dragon's head and pushing it out, but Duque's godly sword stabbed toward the dragon's throat. Back and forth, after countless rounds, Duque finally used his ultimate move. Great Summoning. Deoxyribos Knights. Without giving Isra any time to react, Duque pulled on the dragon's leg and flipped the humanoid dragon over. The still incomparably sharp Duque godly sword turned into a dragon-taming whip and attacked the dragon's lair continuously. Dragon Slayer Sword. Tap and stab. With a moment of carelessness, Duque shook out a 999 combo. The dragon's roar almost pierced through the roof. Seeing that he couldn't win, Isra, who had started the war, chose to retreat strategically. Who would have thought that Duque, who had the upper hand, would not let go? He grabbed the dragon's waist and bit the dragon's nape, activating backstab. The giant dragon completely collapsed, crying and begging for mercy. Unfortunately, Duque was relentless. After a total of 2,333 consecutive stabs, he finally let go of the dying giant dragon. Grabbing Dragon's Peak with his hands, he bit the back of Isra's neck as if he was grinding his teeth. Duque could feel Isra changing with every bite from Duque. From the initial discomfort, to letting him do whatever he wanted. This feeling was awesome. Biting the back of his neck, Duque ordered, "From today onwards, you're my dragon. You can't let other dragons touch you anymore." After a long while, Duque hugged Isra and asked, "Why did you do this?" "Nothing. I felt that you would like it this way, so I wanted to try it. I wanted to do it, so I did it. Anyway, it felt good. Duque was a little stunned. Sure enough, each dragon was different. Xianxia was a classic case of having too many ideas. Isra was completely emotional. As for how his relationship with Isra came about, Duque was also very confused. Just as Isra said, it felt good. Inexplicably, a giant dragon had joined the harem. Duke did not know what to tell his wives about such a muddled matter. But obviously, Xianxia had raised all 4 claws in agreement, and Tyron would probably agree. As for the rest, he did not want to think about it. Where are you going next? Isra had become his dragon, and Duque was naturally even more anxious. I still have a little bit of dragon aspect power left, and can barely maintain the anti-Titan formation on the planet. But I want to rest here for a while. I've asked Elun and Sister Alexstrasza. They said that if there is a way to quickly repair damage to the soul in this world, it's with you. Suddenly remembering something, Isra suddenly became nervous. She hurriedly waved her hands. No, I'm not trying to threaten you. I just want to do it. As for seeking treatment, the Dragon Slumber Church and I both have a lot of savings. We are willing. Duque laughed and hugged Isra, who was a little incoherent because of nervousness. He took a deep breath and said, Silly. You're already my dragon. How can I leave you alone? Duque had tried to replenish his own soul power many times. It was Duque's first time replenishing another being, a demigod at that. This was not an easy task. Duque asked the system elf, and the answer he got was that if Duque could collect a large number of female dragons, preferably green dragons' soul fragments, as raw materials and purify them, he could theoretically transfer them to Isra. In the following days, Duque went to the Emerald Dream many times, looking for dragon soul matter like picking up trash. Isra's dragon soul was damaged by 36%, which was quite an exaggerated ratio. Under normal circumstances, most beings would become crazy or something. Duque spent a week to barely gather all the materials he needed. When Isra opened her mind and let Duque enter her soul to search her memories and compare her soul matter. After another 3 days of preparation, Duque finally succeeded in repairing Isra's soul. The treatment was quite successful, but not 100%, because a certain bastard's hand trembled and accidentally spilled 30g of third-grade porn into Isra's soul. Fortunately, it was just a cosplay series. Then that night, Duque saw Isra dressed as a nurse. What was even more ridiculous was that Xianxia actually took advantage of the fact that the battle above had slowed down to sneak back and put on a battle of the 2 dragons. What battle? It was the blade of Duque's godly sword. If it wasn't for the flames of war raging outside, Duque, this unambitious and unprincipled bastard, would probably be hiding in Karazhan and not coming out. Other heroes couldn't even get a powerful mount if they wanted it. Look at Kudran Wildhammer next door. He had been showing off for decades with a Griffin King. Duque, on the other hand, didn't even look at the leader's standard pure-blooded fire eagle. Because his mount was first the Black Dragon Princess, then the King of Dreams. One person occupied 2 of the 5 dragon aspects. Duque was definitely the only one in the world. Duque played dragon taming every day, and there was a big reason. I'm healing the dragon aspect Isra, otherwise Azeroth's anti-Titan array will collapse. Chapter 2023. The leaders of the Alliance who did not know the situation were moved. Their commander was working too hard. Not only did he have to resist the invasion of the Emerald Dream by the ancient god Enzos, but he also had to use his soul to heal the Green Dragon Queen in order to protect the sky formation of Azeroth. In reality, Duque only waved the dragon-taming whip to explore the mysteries of the dragon's lair, and instantly sent out the Deoxyribose Knights to occupy the dragon's lair again and again. Duque's harem who knew the truth all sent congratulatory messages. Queen Sylvie said, "By the way, don't tell me you're going to deal with Alexstrasza too?" No, I don't have the guts. Kalia said, "Do I have another sister?" That another word was a little hurtful. Jaina said, "All right, your Karazhan territory is huge. Prepare a few more dragon lairs this time." Prepare a few more? What did that mean? Elucia said, "Let me say this first, Arathar's gold is an important collateral. If you don't want your economy to collapse, don't create a dragon nest full of gold coins. Was Isra such a shallow dragon who slept on a bed of gold coins? Imriel said, I will recommend the dragon horn sheath to Sister Isra. I accidentally pricked you with my horn last time. Wait, she had the ultimate transformation spell to remove dragon horns. Anyway, Duque was tired. He wanted to suppress the expansion of his harem, but the godly sword had to see blood. It all depended on when Duque's godly sword turned into a dragon blood sword. Just like that, another 3 days passed before Varian sent news. He had successfully rescued Odin. Odin said that he has important information about the Pantheon and wants me to meet him personally. Duque was stunned. Yes. Odin said so. And very seriously, he wants the Guardians and Dragon aspects to send at least 5 representatives to meet him. This word was so harsh. Usually, meeting with someone of high status like the king would be a charity to those of low status. What did Odin think of the Guardians of Azeroth and the strong natives of the various families? Followers who could come and go at his beck and call? Or did he really think that he was the god King Odin from Earth? Duque immediately understood the crux of the matter. Odin, don't be fooled by how fierce he is. He was also known as the chief protector of Odin, but in reality, there was not a single protector in Odin who cared about him. You Odin can do whatever you want. We Guardians will do our own thing. It was precisely because of this relationship that Odin was so angry that he almost had a stroke on the spot. Oh, he died of a stroke. Duke maliciously cursed Odin for his downfall. It was a pity that the saying, good people don't live long, but scourges live for 1,000 years could not be perfectly applied to Odin, but it could still be applied to some extent. In order to confirm his conjecture, Duque directly contacted the Thunder Guardian Torim and Alexstrasza. Oh, Odin has returned. He wants us to have an audience with him as soon as he returns. What do you think? The Red Dragon Queen's face was nervous. Duque, you know, the meaning of our existence is to fulfill the duties given to us by the Titans. In fact, the Dragon Sleeping Temple has a set of mechanisms. Just now, the Dragon Sleeping Temple received a set of high-level secret orders, which also requires us, the Guardian Dragons, to send representatives to Odin. Duque whistled. How high is it? Can it be higher than the Observer or Garen? The Red Dragon Queen was silent. She could not answer. Sometimes, refusing to answer a question was the best answer. That meant he was taller than Olgaron. One had to know that Odin's original hidden boss, Orgaren, in theory, had the right to initiate a world purification and kill all the creatures on planet Azeroth. He was equivalent to the great Celestial Empire's ancient imperial envoy. On the other side, Torim was also silent. Guardians can be allowed to have their own will, but it is limited to their duties. No Titan creation can violate the mission given by the Pantheon. Like Nisario, the Deathwing who Enzo's forced to become Deepwell Ice with his whispers, or Loken, the King of Wisdom who brainwashed Yogg-Saron, a complete degenerate. Duque shrugged, looking helpless. Since everyone is unhappy with Odin and has to go due to their duties, I have a small suggestion here. Tarim was surprised. Tell me about it? Alexstrasza was the most enthusiastic. She felt that the Red Dragon Queen had suddenly turned into a cute, beast-eared girl, wagging her tail. In fact, everyone knew who Odin represented. However, there were some people in the world who felt good about themselves and had no idea about their own abilities and actions. When Odin caused the Guardians of Odin to split up, how dare they say that they had no responsibility at all? And then oppose Tyr's decision to grant the Ancestor Dragon Titan divine power and turn it into a guardian dragon. The Dragon Sleeping Temple would be unhappy with Odin? Stop joking. Seeing that the magic mirror images of the big bosses on both sides were looking at him with longing, Duque smiled like a fox. No, according to legend, Odin's Sky Fortress is an amazing sky fortress. I think we can't be rude when we go to meet someone. Wait. It's not appropriate to use Naxxramas and the Dalajan for this kind of thing. It was true that Torim was the king of lightning, but he was too honest. Otherwise, why would he foolishly go to the Church of Wisdom to find Loken even though he knew he was no match for them? No, trust me, Torim. Duque is definitely a very powerful kid, and it won't affect the overall situation. The Red Dragon Queen actually looked more confident than Duque. Duque laughed. Leave it to me this time. Yes, I can even entrust my sister to you. Of course I trust you. A certain unreliable big sister shouted, and Isra, who was hiding at the side, blushed on the spot. Torim was speechless. Duque was speechless. So awkward. What to do? Urgent. Waiting online. The next morning, Storm Fjord. This place used to have the most chaotic storms and the most chaotic elemental energy flow. But recently, the crimson sky and the sky fortress that was hanging high in the sky, just enough for mortals to see from the ground, were the only main theme here. Outside the magnificent Martyr's Palace, a bright red carpet was laid out. One by one, they had white wings, wore armor, and looked like battle angels, and stood in neat rows on both sides of the red carpet. Sitting on the supreme throne of the Martyr's Palace, Odin, who had a huge body of 10 stories tall, was dressed in armor and looked extraordinary. However, his right index finger kept tapping on the armrest of the throne. His subordinates all knew that Odin was in a bad mood at the moment. The appointed time for the audience was approaching, but in theory, none of the guardians who were supposed to come were in sight. Odin had even thoughtfully prepared messengers and magic arrays on the ground opposite the Sky Fortress. Chapter 2024. A Hongmen banquet had to have a Hongmen banquet's grandeur. At every support point, there was a large group of fully armed Wagri waiting on them. No one who could become a Wagri was weak. Powerhouses who had not stepped into the hero realm would not be favored. This was also the tragedy of the Vrykul. For 25,000 years, every Vrykul hero would have their souls forcibly taken away after death. Some Vrykul who dared to resist the Vrykul's palace were forcibly killed and turned into Wagri while they were still alive. Of course, the result was that the Wagri were extremely powerful. In history, the first Wagri, Wuxia, was definitely a demigod. She might be weak among demigods, but it was undeniable that her combat strength had indeed crossed the threshold of the god realm. As for Irelia, Jalma Stratholm, and Quartermaster Ranov, these NPCs that the warrior players were familiar with, they had at least the strength of a legendary hero here. They were just a step away from transcending the mortal world. Russell. In the hourglass, the last bit of sand was about to fall through the funnel-shaped opening into the lower layer. Odin was getting more and more impatient. He felt that he was being insulted. He had used the name of that person to summon the native powerhouses of this world and the guardians who should listen to his orders in theory. How could they be so negligent? Did they still remember their duties? Did they still think that the Supreme Pantheon Temple's seneschal was a big deal? Odin clenched his right fist. There were 3 minutes left at most. All of a sudden, the airspace around the Sky Fortress started to fluctuate in a wide area. Odin stood up abruptly. His face was ashen as he cried out in shock, "Are these people rebelling?" Beside him, his first servant, Supreme Commander Heria of the Wagri, had a complicated expression in her eyes. Her soul had been completely controlled. She could not resist Odin's will at all, but it did not mean that she could not enjoy Odin's embarrassment. The huge spatial ripple would be a magnitude 12 earthquake if it were on the ground. If it were on the sea, it would undoubtedly cause a huge tsunami and the legendary 100-meter-tall waves. However, in the sky, the impact was limited. 3 gigantic man-made objects began to reveal themselves from the illusion. The first thing that appeared on the left was a huge temple that stood on the pure white snow plains. The area of the towering round tower was reduced by each level. Each level seemed to be mounted on a cylindrical building with a golden dome and huge pillars. Divine golden radiance shone from every hall or tower within the inner sanctum. Countless giant dragons flew in a neat formation, circling around the divine temple. This was undoubtedly the Dragon Slumber Shrine. Then, another temple appeared on the right. It stood on the towering ice mountain peak. Between the 2 towers that reached into the clouds, there was a golden vortex gate filled with psychedelic colors. If one were to pay close attention, they would also be able to see the gigantic runic pillars and glorious city walls that were built in the size of the Titans. Looking at it, Odin's right eyelid twitched uncontrollably. Of course, he knew who this was, Odin's holy land of titans. The one that Odin couldn't stand the most was the one that appeared last. Why did you appear after the dragon slumber shrine and Odin? Doesn't that mean you're the boss, you're the leader of Azeroth? Regardless of whether Odin was happy or not, a huge and exquisite wizard tower appeared in Odin's vision just like that. Compared to Odin's and the dragon slumber shrines, the wizard tower appeared more slender. It was protected by 6 secondary towers, supported by arcades and cantilevered structures. The main tower of this mage tower was like a launch vehicle on Earth, but it was also a bit like a huge rapier, piercing through the heavens and the earth. Odin had done his homework. He knew that this wizard tower belonged to Duke Marcus, the world's most powerful wizard, and also the biggest thorn in his side of the plan. Odin snorted coldly, full of anger. The 3 huge buildings did not appear in the sky of the Sky Fortress in the form of projections. 3 huge space tunnels with a diameter of more than 200 meters connected these 3 buildings that were located in different parts of the world to the Sky Fortress in the sky of the endless ocean. This high level of space magic and this seemingly endless magic power was in itself a kind of demonstration. 3 long and wide tunnels extended from the entrances of the 3 buildings, like the gangplank used to board a ship. On the left was a gigantic red dragon. It was striding elegantly along the long, suspended passage that was less than a meter thick. It felt like her body was so huge that the board under her feet might collapse at any time. On the right was the Thunder Guardian Torim, who was holding a giant hammer, and the Frost Guardian Hodier, who was holding a giant frost axe. The most eye-catching thing for Odin was the one in the middle. It was an elemental giant that was even bigger than Odin. The purplish-blue Titan energy, the snow-like frost elements, and the fiery red and blazing fire elements presented a perfect harmony on the body of this elemental giant. 3 figures were on the elemental crown on the giant's head. The one sitting on the elemental throne in the middle was a young man with a faint smile on his face. On his left was a woman wearing a red mage robe with black edges. She had a noble temperament and an undisguised charm. On the right was a night elf with emerald green hair who was only wearing a breastplate, leather pauldrons, and trousers. If not for the pair of large curved dragon horns on her head, one would really think that she was an elf at first glance. The surging dragon aura from both of them made Odin think, "Are you King kidding me? 5 guardians and a dragon aspect, no more, no less." The mortal representative was also here, and there was only one person, Duque. Oh no, it was only then that Odin noticed that there was actually a strange-looking machine behind the elemental giant. He could sense that there was a powerful mortal inside. William, the mortal powerhouse who had saved him from Hela's imprisonment. Originally, Odin had quite a good impression of William, but after seeing William's follower appearance and Duque's arrogant attitude, Odin was infuriated. From the huge open door of the Martyr's Palace, Odin's loud voice could be heard. The dignified guardian dragons of the Titans have become insignificant mortals. You have really thrown away the face of the glorious guardians. Before Duque could speak, Onyxia could not help but say, I can do whatever I want. What lousy guardian dragons. If not for Duque asking me to come, I wouldn't even want to come. Let the anti-Titan guardian formation collapse and release the Burning Legion. When that time comes, you, the guardian chief, will be the first to die. Chapter 2025. Odin had never seen such an arrogant guardian. The other party was so rude and looked down on his authority. How could he, the chief guardian, put his face in front of everyone? Odin wanted face, and he called himself the noblest existence on this planet. He was already 1 level higher than the other guardians, and 1.5 levels higher than the dragon aspects. Against a second-generation dragon aspect like Onyxia, he would be at a disadvantage and lose his status if he were to personally deal with her. How dare you! No matter how much Heria disliked Odin, Heria could not ignore Odin being rebuked like this. The next moment, she rushed out like lightning and went straight for Onyxia. From the looks of it, she actually wanted to slap Onyxia. Tisk! The black dragon was full of disdain. From the corner of her eye, She saw that Duque had no intention of making a move. She was prepared to teach this waggery a lesson herself, who knew that things like acting cool were really hard to describe. Just as Hire was about to pounce over, a cold snort suddenly came from the elemental giant under Duque. The male voice was as hot as lava and full of anger. Suddenly, a pair of phoenix wings grew out of the elemental giant's back. In less than 1/100th of a second, it had already covered the sky and covered Hire. Bam! As the number 1 waggery under Odin, she was actually not weak. Unfortunately, she was not strong enough in front of the real elemental demigod Kale, who controlled the land of fire for Duque. Even if Kale, was not here, just a remote control of the fire elemental attack was still not something Hire could block. In one exchange, she was flapped by the phoenix wings and returned the way she came. Chief Waggery was blasted to the side of Odin's throne like a cannonball, crashing into countless things. This time, it was Odin's turn to be embarrassed. A large palm that could easily shatter a heavy tank slammed into the throne. Odin's expression was shockingly ugly. Sensing their master's will, the waggery who were originally ceremonial troops people drew their swords in unison and glared at Duque and the others. Duque was disdainful as he looked at Wagner, who had the appearance of a mighty birdman. You see, Odin on Earth knows how to behave himself. The Valkyries sent out were all beautiful and had hot bodies. They did not rely on coercion to absorb the souls of heroes on the battlefield. During the day, he would be a follower, following the heroes to the battlefield, or he would fight with other heroes in the arena. At night, he would accompany the heroes to the banquet and party all night long. He would drink when he needed to, and he would even take the initiative to serve them in bed late at night. So in countless heroic epics, Valkyrie was the perfect wife or lover in men's hearts. A so-called expert like Odin, who had been brought back by brute force, was useless. Faced with Odin's arrogance, Thorim and Alexstrasza obviously couldn't act out openly. The ugly one, of course, would be Duque. Dumuk snapped his fingers. The sky 10 kilometers away suddenly flashed with a continuous stream of flames. A mere 10 seconds later, countless cannonballs pierced through the sky. However, these cannonballs were extremely accurate, flying above and below the sky fortress. Not a single one hit the protective shield of the sky fortress. After the heavy rain of cannonballs, thousands of elemental channels opened in the sky. The blazing fire element, the heavy water element, the ethereal wind element, and countless elemental creatures stepped out of the elemental channels. They stood on the elemental platforms floating in the air, using their strange elemental eyes to stare at the sky fortress. 100, 1,000, 10,000, 100,000. When the number exceeded 100,000, Odin's face was as black as the bottom of a pot. The other party was clearly demonstrating to him, the chief of the guardians of Odin, that they had absolute power and could destroy him at any time. Odin almost couldn't suppress the rage in his heart. He was ready to teach Duque a lesson himself. Just as Odin stood up, his muscles bulging, and countless titan energy attached to his arm muscles like wriggling snakes, Duque suddenly smiled. Odin could be so domineering, of course, because he represented the will of the pantheon. That Usur was most likely watching everything that was happening here from somewhere. As long as the Titans had some brains, they would not sit by and watch Odin fight with the strongest local force in Azeroth, especially when Duque controlled the 4 major elemental realms. Perhaps the Titans had some thoughts of suppressing the alliance. When they saw how powerful Duque was, even the Guardians and Dragon aspects that they had set up did not care about Odin. Instead, they seemed to be neutral but actually supported the alliance. Everything would be different. As expected, just as the irascible Odin was about to attack, a deep male voice came from the sky above the sky fortress. A powerful human demigod. Sir's voice was surprisingly young. Although the age of the Titans was frozen, it was recorded that the Pantheon was at least 50,000 years old. Unfortunately, although this voice had a sense of wisdom at the same time, it revealed an inhuman coldness, as if hinting at the supremacy of its owner, as well as his disregard for the lives of mortals. That was absolute power, the most original source, the source of power that no living being in the world of Azeroth could resist. Wagri, who was beside the red carpet in the Sky Fortress, the dragons that were flying around the dragon's slumber temple, and the mechanical guardians that were guarding Odin all prostrated themselves on the ground. Even Odin, Torim, Alexstrasza, and the humanoid Isra either knelt on one knee, placed their right hands on their left chest, or turned into their dragon forms and lowered their proud dragon heads to show their utmost respect to the owner of the voice. Only Duque sat on the elemental throne casually. Beside him was Onyxia, who was unwilling to bow but was intimidated by Amancer's powerful aura. Onyxia was on the verge of collapsing. Duque brazenly pulled the Black Dragon Princess into his arms and used his aura to protect Onyxia. This scene made all the Titan elites feel as if the heavens were falling and the earth was splitting apart. God, that was Amancer, the master of the Pantheon, the recognized common god of the entire universe. How could Duque ignore the authority of Amancer and the Pantheon? Was he not afraid that the gods would be angry and crush all living beings in the world of Azeroth, including Duque? Even the Alliance leaders who were secretly watching the live broadcast through the magician's eyes were scared out of their wits. Their teeth were chattering, and the thought of surrendering rose from the depths of their souls. Only Duke calmly withstood the Pantheon Palace Master's startling aura that was like a falling star. No one knew that in Duque's eyes, Amancer was a special NPC. Chapter 2026. Perhaps Amancer had once gone against the heavens, the earth, and the air, destroying the stars with a flip of his hand and creating a world with a raise of his hand. He was omniscient and omnipotent. But that was an old story from 25,000 years ago. If the Pantheon was so powerful and the Titans had the ability to beat Sargeras, they wouldn't have had the Pantheon overturned by the traitor Sargeras, or been chased around the universe by the Burning Legion, looking for a place to hide. I am the master of the Pantheon, sir. It was a simple introduction, but the Guardians already knew who the owner of the voice was from the soul connection. Knowing was one thing, but it was another for their master to announce it himself. Almost at the same time that Amancer announced his name, all the Guardians and Dragon aspects at the scene responded in unison. Servant Torim, XXX, pays his respects to the Supreme Master of the Gods. The loud voices turned into a torrent, and then converged into an incomparably exaggerated sound bomb that rumbled continuously between the four giant buildings connected by the spatial tunnel. Not to mention the Guardians, Dragon aspects, and Titan creations that belonged to the Pantheon, even the Alliance leaders who were watching this scene through the video couldn't help but kneel on the ground. For example, Danath Trollbane, the Old Wolf King Jean, and Moira Bronzebeard. However, every single powerful existence noticed it. Duque didn't kneel, and didn't even have the most basic etiquette. He just sat on the elemental throne on top of the elemental giant's head without moving. Onyxia, who was beside him, was clearly scared to the point of peeing, but he still held the Black Dragon Princess' slender waist with one hand, not giving her any chance to yield. This was no longer a situation where he was the only sober person in a drunken stupor. This was a situation where everything in the world submitted to him, and even if they were unhappy, they would avoid him. Only Duque showed his unyielding character. Duke Marcus, you are too presumptuous. Odin was so angry that his lungs were about to explode. Facing the Supreme Master of the Pantheon, why don't you kneel? Don't forget, you humans are also creations of the Pantheon. Duque looked at Odin as if he was looking at an idiot, then looked up at the gigantic figure in the void. If one were to ignore the powerful divine light surrounding his virtual image, Amancer would look like a kind old man with white hair and a white beard. Dressed in a long white robe with a blue shawl, he looked elegant and noble, unapproachable. Duque ignored Odin and questioned Athel instead. Oh, dare I ask, to the Pantheon Temple, does it mean that those who don't kneel are enemies? Or could it be that the name of the Pantheon Temple alone could make the billions of races in the universe kneel before them? If this sign is so effective, why don't you just ask Sargeras to tie himself up and come here crying and pleading guilty? Duque's words were simply devastating. Apart from Odin, who was about to go berserk with rage, every Guardian and Dragon aspect was dumbfounded. How dare Duque say such a thing? That was Sir. That was the pantheon that had once beaten all the ancient gods into minced meat. Even if Sargeras rose and almost destroyed the order of the entire universe, the Pantheon Temple was still the origin of most intelligent beings in the world. The straightforward Torim was the first to lose his temper. Duque, the origin of humans in Azeroth, is actually closely related to the Guardian of Order, Tyr. Alexstrasza, who was most concerned about Duque, also chimed in. Duque, what are you doing? Didn't we swear to protect Azeroth together? We are the closest allies. What do you think you're doing right now? It sounded like a scolding, but it was actually a great concern from the Red Dragon. Sir's voice stopped for a moment. He was giving the creations of the Pantheon a chance to perform, and at the same time, he was observing Duke Marcus, a low-level intelligent being who had risen to fame in just 30 years. Odin's irritable roar sounded again. According to the laws of the Pantheon, your death should not be regretted. But on account of your contributions against the Burning Legion and the fact that you have severely injured Sargeras and kill Jaden, I will give you a chance on behalf of the Pantheon. Submit to the Pantheon, or be destroyed. When he heard Odin's words, Duque couldn't help but grit his teeth. If he was still the noob from back then, he would probably have accepted it. Although he hated the feeling that his fate did not belong to him, and although it felt a little uncomfortable to be controlled by the Pantheon. After all, the other party was the legendary omniscient and omnipotent Holy Existence. Even if they ordered him to carry bricks, there was nothing to be ashamed of. But today was different from the past. I have managed Azeroth so well, and you want to pick the fruits of my labor? To put it bluntly, the Pantheon felt that they were noble and refused to lower themselves to help the mortals like in the game. Or rather, the situation in the game was what made Duque feel incredulous. Why did the titans of the Pantheon have to work for the mortals? So today's confrontation was actually a battle for dominance. Cooperation was necessary, but who would be the leader was another matter. The Pantheon couldn't let go of its pride, and the alliance was not so stupid. The other party threw out the name of the Pantheon and had to kneel on the spot. In the face of Odin's threat, Duque's reaction was, Ha! Odin, who do you think you are? How dare you represent the Pantheon? Sir did not utter a word. Do you really think you're a titan? Alright, if the Pantheon is full of idiots who can't see the situation clearly, then we don't have to cooperate. Duke's words were like a giant hammer smashing onto a large bell, causing all the guardians and dragons to feel dizzy on the spot, and they were thrown into a state of confusion. Odin cursed, Who do you think you are? Duque retorted, I killed Sargeras. Odin was indignant. That's just his soul. Duque said disdainfully, I killed Jaden. Odin was rendered speechless. Duque was unforgiving and laid out his achievements like a machine gun. I destroyed the Archerons. I blew up Sargeras's Void Fortress. I even got Argus's Star Key. I've done so many earth-shattering things in 30 years. What have you, Odin, done in 25,000 years? Odin, the great manager of Otter, could not refute Duque's words at all. His face swelled to the color of a pig's liver. At this time, everyone noticed that more and more huge figures were being projected down from the sky above the Martyr's Palace. They were the other titans of the Pantheon. Duque was not afraid at all. The millions of people in the Alliance and I have fought for so long. Isn't it for freedom and the reproduction of our race? If it's just to change masters and continue to be slaves, we might as well sell ourselves to the Burning Legion. They might even offer a higher price. Chapter 2027. Madman, have you forgotten where you came from? Odin couldn't help but scold him again. Enough. The one who spoke was another female titan standing beside Ona the Life-Giver. This Duke Marcus isn't from our universe. This sentence might be the best way to drive a wedge between the two of them. At this moment, many of the leaders of the Alliance felt a huge wave in their hearts. Duque wasn't moved. He even wanted to laugh. If he really hadn't leaked any information, his position in the Alliance would probably be shaken by this overt plot. As history progressed, Duque first revealed his identity to his own harem. He couldn't hide anything from the person who slept with him. The women in his harem were extremely shocked at first, but they quickly accepted this fact. In fact, even the Drenii, who were considered aliens by the people of Azeroth, were here. There was nothing unacceptable about a human from another universe. The ones who leaked the information were the core leaders of the Alliance, such as William, Magni, Muradin, Jurban, and the others. Just as the leaders who didn't have much say were shocked, they saw the calm core leaders of the Alliance. They were shocked to find out that they were still quite a distance away from the core power of the Alliance. Magni was the first to speak in the throne conference. Hey, we can even accept the Drenii, who are from the same race as Eridar. Why can't we accept a human from the Outerverse as our leader? The dwarves will listen to whoever can lead the Alliance to a stronger state and protect our planet. William calmly said, since Uncle Duque thinks that he's a Stormwind person, then he's a Stormwind person. Even the Stormwind people didn't have any objections, let alone the leaders of the other countries. At this moment, many of the leaders realized that Duque was too awesome. Duque's wives were all queens or leaders, and they controlled more than half of the authority in the Alliance. The dwarves, gnomes, and Stormwind Kingdom were not in a mess, so the Gilneas, Stromgarde, Pandaren, and other countries or races that had only joined in the last 10 years in various forms and were in fact second tier, would not have any objections. The big shots of the Alliance quickly came to an agreement, and Duque spoke slowly. So what? I am indeed a human. But my lover, my friend, my child, and my beloved planet Azeroth are here. I am willing to pay a high price to protect this beautiful planet. On the other hand, if the Pantheon Temple is unreasonable and demands unfair domination and enslavement, please forgive me for rejecting it on behalf of the millions of intelligent beings in Azeroth. At most, I'll open a portal and send them to the universe I was born in. Aren't you afraid of drawing the Burning Legion into your universe and causing more disasters? Odin retorted. Duque sneered, sorry. An existence like Lordun, Sir, is known as Heavenly Father level powerhouse in our world. Although there are not many, there are still 3 to 5 of them in a star system. In particular, we have a guy called Thanos, who can turn half a star system into ashes with a snap of his fingers. If Sargeras dares to go to my side, I really want to see who will win between the two of them. None of the Titans who could make it to the Pantheon Temple were simple. They had their own mysterious power to judge the truth of the other party's words. It was precisely because they sensed that Duque was speaking the truth that the Titans found it difficult to deal with. On the other side, Odin was rebuked again, and he felt his chest tighten. Duque didn't care about Odin anymore. This guy was good at fighting, but he was not as sinister and vicious as the Odin in the legends on Earth. In Duke's eyes, Odin, the Grand Chief of Otter, was just a foot soldier with the word brave carved on his chest. Now, Duque was not afraid of those who had nothing to lose. He could still advance or retreat. If the Pantheon was at its peak, would Sir talk nonsense with Duque? He would have sent a bunch of guardians to teach Duque how to behave. Even if Duque called him Grandpa, he wouldn't let Duque off easily. Unfortunately, times had changed. For a moment, even Sir couldn't find an entry point to suppress this arrogant demigod. At this moment, Duque raised his head and said, failure isn't scary. What's scary is not being able to turn things around. The Pantheon lost to Sargeras 25,000 years ago. Now, you have the best chance to join hands with the mortal alliance of Azeroth to deal with the Burning Legion with equal status and identity. What kind of joke is this? Duque, don't go too far. This time, it wasn't Odin, but Torim and Alexstrasza who couldn't take it anymore. This wasn't their fault. They could accept Otter and the Dragon Slumber Temple cooperating with an alliance that was already rising and had similar strength. Deep down, they still thought that the Pantheon was high and mighty. The glory of the Creator couldn't be tarnished. No matter how high and mighty the Pantheon was, they shouldn't stoop down and be equal to the alliance formed by mortals. Seeing that the other side was about to flip out, Duque threw an even bigger bomb. The Pantheon is very strong, but the premise is that the Titans are still alive. Still alive? Alive? Alive. This news was like a bolt out of the blue. Every guardian, aspect dragon, and even the alliance leader who heard this news were so shocked that they almost fainted on the spot. What? The supreme titans of the pantheon had actually been annihilated? Everyone guessed that 25,000 years ago, the fall of the titans' most powerful general, Sargeras, had caught the pantheon off guard. The pantheon must have suffered heavy losses. Otherwise, Sargeras and his burning legion wouldn't have been able to dominate the universe for so many years. Even though they lost, no one expected the pantheon to lose so completely. Duque said that the titans were all dead. Then who was talking to them now? Duque curled his lips indifferently. Great king of the gods, Lord and Sir, don't tell me you don't even have the courage to admit your current situation and lie to a small indigenous half-god in your eyes? This time, Sir's wife, Iona, couldn't hold it in anymore. How dare you? So what if we lost our physical bodies? As long as we want to, we can resurrect at any time. Her words indirectly admitted the predicament of the titans of the pantheon. Yes, they were really dead. These words had undoubtedly shaken the heart of the guardian who firmly believed that his master was invincible in the world. That was a spiritual attack on the level of raging waves. Unexpectedly, Duque's words shocked them to death. Resurrect? Of course you can. The premise is that you can find a green planet suitable for nurturing life, occupy the planet's core, erase its consciousness, and turn the planet into your new body. Also, in the 10,000 years that you've regained your bodies, you can't be disturbed by powerhouses like the ancient gods or Sargeras. Otherwise, you're finished. Chapter 2028. At this moment, everyone who heard this had shock written all over their faces. This was especially true for Uther, the king of myriad worlds, who was trembling uncontrollably. This was too shocking for the titans. This was the ultimate secret of the pantheon, and they did not even preserve this method of nurturing titans in any form. In this world, no one would have such a powerful imagination to imagine something as shocking as a planet being a titan. Actually, Duque didn't know either. Titans, as the name suggested, were huge humanoid beings. Ordinary guys that were dozens of stories tall were huge for humans, but they still didn't have the right to be called titans. Just how big was the titan? When Duque traveled through time and space, he peeked at a certain scene. The background of the scene was Azeroth, but the huge humanoid figure attached to Azeroth was Sargeras. Sargeras was the size of a planet. Coupled with the fact that during the Primordial War, Duque had personally opened the portal powered by the Well of Eternity to the size of dozens of stories tall, and Sargeras still couldn't pass through the portal, one could imagine how huge titans were. Even if he used all kinds of spells and abilities, he still couldn't shrink his body to human size. With a planet-sized body, the ability to change worlds and create life, and almost infinite power, this was Titan. Through these conditions, one could see how bad the situation of the titans of the pantheon was. Back then, Sargeras, the titan who was the most capable of fighting, betrayed them and directly destroyed the titans of the pantheon. Although it was called the pantheon, there were actually only a few titans, less than 2 digits. Being defeated in a direct confrontation, Sir and the others could be said to have lost all they had left. That's right, Azeroth was their last pair of pants. The seemingly invincible Pantheon Temple had its own laboratories and bases throughout the universe, leaving behind countless guardians. Unfortunately, apart from Azeroth, there was no other planet with an anti-Titan formation. Most guardians were at the level of high-level Void Lords. Under the attack of the Burning Legion's Sea of Demons, the only outcome was death. Duque calmly stated his conclusion. The Pantheon Temple may have been very strong in the past, but today, the only troops that the Pantheon Temple can command are the direct troops in the spaceship called the Pantheon Temple, as well as the Guardians and Dragon aspects like Azeroth. It's no exaggeration to say that the battle in Azeroth is the Pantheon Temple's last hope to turn the tables. If even Azeroth falls, the Pantheon would have no choice but to leave this universe and search for hope and salvation in other universes. Am I right? Duque's powerful voice silenced the entire Martyr's Palace. His words attracted the attention of all beings in the air, including the guardians, dragon aspects, and all the low-level servants of the pantheon. They wanted to know if their duties were still meaningful. Does my glory still exist? Was his almighty master really as distressed as Duque said? Even Wuxia, the king of gods, was silent for a moment. A fallen phoenix was no better than a chicken. 25,000 years ago, the titans who had been glorious and destroyed anyone they saw would never have imagined that they would be in such dire straits. It was not that Wuxia and the other titans had not thought of other ways over the years. Unfortunately, the guardians who were loyal to them had been killed by the Burning Legion, and their strongholds had been uprooted. When they realized that their creations could not withstand the fallen titans' demonic army, they had no choice but to hide the Pantheon Temple. In the void of a certain galaxy, a gorgeous palace floated in a well-concealed spatial rift. That was the Pantheon Temple. In the huge temple, several translucent figures gathered together and looked at the tiny human named Duke Marcus on the screen. In the eyes of the titans of the Pantheon Temple, the peak-level demigod that mortals could not reach was only at the level of a top-level guardian. Faced with Duque tearing apart the Pantheon Temple's last shroud, the titans were not angry, indignant, or ashamed. Instead, they all looked calm. This was the titans. Their lifespans were measured in units of 100,000 years, and they were existences that surpassed mortals. Because of their earth-shattering strength and methods that mortals could not imagine, they were called gods. 25,000 years had passed. Perhaps they had been angry, roaring, and complaining when Sargeras had betrayed them and destroyed them. After such a long period of time, all that was left was peace. Looking at Duque's ridiculously young and seemingly easygoing face, which was filled with stubbornness, the titans chuckled in admiration at his audacity to challenge the Pantheon Temple. Dreamweaver Noganon laughed. The guardians we created have their own thinking abilities and are very powerful. However, they have lost their variables. As long as they are not destroyed, there will be no difference between 25,000 years ago and today. Now, these mortals who have their own will have chosen a human from the outerverse who is more ambitious and daring to negotiate with us. Don't you think that this is also a success for us? It was also because of Noganon's words that the Titans recalled the past that lingered in the deepest recesses of their memories. That was the era when the Pantheon dominated the universe, guiding all life and creating miracles. Even after 25,000 years, they would still dream of that good time every night. Now, a seemingly insignificant existence had pierced through the illusion of the Pantheon Temple. Not only did this not anger the Titans, but it actually gave them a glimmer of hope. Thal spoke. His words were extremely profound. This was because other than the Guardians and the Dragon aspect, only a mortal like Duque could hear him. The video and sound effects that the other Alliance leaders were watching were completely cut off the moment Thal spoke. It seems like you also have a rather powerful ability to pry into time and space. Since you have seen the Pantheon Temple's predicament, there is no need for me to continue maintaining this false strength. Then let us have an honest conversation. After all, be it the Pantheon Temple or your world, they are all so fragile. Maintaining the status quo will not help us defeat the Burning Legion. Amon, Thal pointed. Odin, Torim, Alexstrasza, and Duque all felt a part of them suddenly sublimate. It was as if their souls had split into a soul clone and were absorbed into a mysterious domain. They could hear the voices of Amon, Thal, and the other participants, and they could also speak there. However, most of their senses were still in the Sky Fortress. Thal said, "Duke Marcus, tell me your plan. This will determine whether the Pantheon Temple will cooperate with you in the way you want." Chapter 2029. The war that spread across the entire planet of Azeroth was still ongoing. War had now become the only main theme of this planet that had been plagued by disasters for decades. In every corner of the planet, the generals of the Alliance were commanding large fleets to fight against the demons of the Burning Legion. But at this time, the leaders of the Alliance, who were supposed to be the backbone of the various kingdoms and armies, were not in the mood to command. The wind blew from the west of the Endless Sea. On the broken islands that had been ravaged by the flames of war, the forest rustled softly. On Naxxramas, which was not far behind the front line of the battle, the wind seemed to be telling something to the leaders. The leaders were waiting, eager to hear the voice of fate. Unfortunately, the voice of fate was too vague and elusive. Everyone could only sigh from time to time, waiting for the final result. "Duque, how dare you?" "That's sir." Old Jean smiled bitterly. "Maybe I'm really old. If it were me, I would probably agree to the Pantheon's deployment unconditionally." This was normal. Young people were more spirited. When one was old, their edges would be smoothed out by cruel reality. It was easier for them to seek stability and a high probability of winning. William said firmly, "He's Duke Marcus, the man who led the Alliance to prosperity. I believed in him before, I believe now, and I will never doubt him in the future." On the other side, Valen's soul was also teaching Imriel. "Do you see? That's a leader. It doesn't matter if he's supreme or not. It doesn't matter if he doesn't have to take responsibility for his decisions. As a leader, you must remember that your decision can affect the fate of countless people. Countless people live because of you, and countless people may die because of you. It all depends on your decision." Imriel was a little distressed. It's too difficult to make a decision of that level. After all, it's the Pantheon. Valen was also emotional. "Even I wouldn't dare to force the Pantheon to that extent for the people of Azeroth, even though it might give us the best conditions." "Yes." Hoof nodded vigorously. "To become a leader like Duque, you need talent, hard work, and even more so, some experiences that cannot be replicated. I have no intention of forcing you to reach the level of Duque. I just want to say that there are many paths in this world, and not all of them lead to hardship." Mentor, you mean, it was rare for Valen to be so frivolous. "Actually, your relationship with Duke has already helped Delaney a lot." "Tutor," the Hoof was anxious and blushed. The group of queens, on the other hand, had their hearts on Duke. In Lordaeron, Queen Kalia looked at her daughter, Emily, who was happily playing in the garden while looking back at the magic mirror from time to time. "I really want to know how the negotiation went." Kalia sighed. In another image, Elysia was also holding her cheeks. It's fine as long as Duque doesn't anger the Pantheon Titan." Queen Sylvie laughed. "How is that possible? If he didn't do something, he wouldn't be Duque." Jaina laughed as well. "But he has never let us down, has he?" On the other side, carrying the hopes of his women, the leaders and soldiers of the Alliance, and the hopes of billions of people in Azeroth, Duque and Sir began to have a frank conversation. "Before I tell you my plan, I'll first state the request of the people of Azeroth." "Go ahead," Sir replied calmly. In fact, he was already prepared for the Pantheon to bleed. Unexpectedly, Duque did not demand an exorbitant price. "Whether it's me or the people of Azeroth, we don't have the intention of dominating the universe. It's enough to be able to live freely on planet Azeroth. If we can destroy the Burning Legion this time, we only need the Pantheon to guarantee this. Unless it's to destroy demons and evil forces targeting Azeroth, the army of the people of Azeroth will not step out of the planet. It was like this in the past, and it will be like this in the future. After this war, the glory of the Pantheon will once again shine in the universe. Even Azeroth can continue to be a name, claiming to be under the jurisdiction of the Pantheon. If Azeroth becomes the new Titan of the Pantheon in the future, then I hope that she can leave a seed of life for this planet, to ensure that the planet will not wither and be destroyed because of the loss of the star soul and core." The Titans had their own secret way of communicating. They all felt that Duque really had no desires. "You only want this much?" Iona felt that it was a little unbelievable. "If you're talking about the future, yes. This is enough for the people of Azeroth. But in this war, we mortals need the support of the Pantheon." Duque's words were sonorous and forceful. "There's no need to discuss this. As long as we can destroy the Burning Legion, the Pantheon will spare no effort." "Tell us your plan," Norganon said. Duque smiled. "I don't know if you've noticed, but I once traveled back to Azeroth 10,000 years ago and blew up Sardra's nest in the Twisting Nether during the Battle of the Ancients. This led to an unexpected result. As Duque spoke, the Titan's expressions finally changed. A hint of surprise flashed in Onusir's eyes. He couldn't help but take out the Pantheon scepter from the void. The circles of golden Titan runes on the scepter lit up. The air in the Pantheon was filled with an excited atmosphere. The Titans' hearts became excited because of a mortal's proposal. At that moment, the cosmic wind that blew past the Pantheon started to grow stronger. The wind of the stars, Onusir said silently in his heart. It had been 25,000 years, and the Titans had been hiding in this secret place. They didn't take revenge or fight back. They silently watched as their creations and guardians were defeated by the Burning Legion one by one. The reason why Onusir made such a decision was because he couldn't see any hope. A grand battle couldn't save the Pantheon Temple and this world. Had 25,000 years really erased the hatred and pain? Definitely not. Revenge for a vile person would never be late. It was never too late for the Titans to take revenge. Onusir had been waiting for a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but he didn't expect this opportunity to be created by a weak mortal in his eyes. Countless existences had proposed plans to defeat the Burning Legion to him. In fact, every plan he heard before was based on a lot of speculation and even imagination. Those fellows didn't even know what Sardra's Achilles' heel was, yet they were spouting nonsense, thinking that they could win this war with their meager forces and the few remaining underlings of the Pantheon. Duque was different. He was reasonable and had evidence. He had to admit defeat. Chapter 2030. What convinced the Titans the most was Duque's actual achievements. Unlike those idiots who only knew how to shout slogans, Duque's achievements were solid. In addition, Duque had once entered the upper echelons of the Burning Legion, so he was very familiar with the demons. They just didn't know if Duque had any hidden backups or spies in the Burning Legion. Duque's plan was very thoughtful and perfect. The Titans had been Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles for more than 20,000 years, so they didn't care about a little more time and cost. As long as they didn't pressure the Pantheon Temple, there was nothing the Pantheon Temple couldn't give. The entire discussion took an hour. For this kind of universe-level big force, this meeting time could be said to be lightning fast. It was like stealing a bell. An hour later, the Alliance broadcast to all channels. With an excited tone and expression, Sally announced, "All Alliance members, all Alliance soldiers." Just now, the Alliance commander Duke Marcus represented the Alliance and reached a consensus with the king of the Pantheon Temple, Onusir, after a friendly and harmonious discussion. In order to fight against evil, in the next war against the Burning Legion, the Pantheon Temple will work closely with the Alliance as a strategic alliance. And after the war against the Burning Legion, the Pantheon Temple will recognize the independence and freedom of the intelligent races of Azeroth. Including the Sleeping Dragon Temple, Oder, Odum, and the Sky Fortress, all the Guardians, Guardian Dragons, and Titan creations of Azeroth will be included in the Alliance Army's battle order and accept the unified command of the Alliance Army. The Guardians led by Odin, the director of Oder, will provide free weapon charging, career guidance, follower employment, and other services to the Alliance soldiers. When the Alliance professionals clean up the battlefield, please pay close attention to your spoils of war. After communicating with the will of the planet of Azeroth, a large number of powerful energy clusters have been released. These energy clusters will randomly purify and sublimate the spoils of war of the Alliance warriors, directly promoting them to low-tier divine weapons. This announcement was like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples, and it immediately caused an uproar among the people and soldiers. More than that, it was an indescribable surprise. In the face of the endless invasion of the demonic army, the various races of Azeroth gritted their teeth and held on. Since the start of the war, thanks to the arrangements and wise commands of the leaders of the Alliance, although they were at a disadvantage, the situation did not collapse. The only thing that remained was the rising number of casualties. The man in the family died, and the old father took over the flag of the deceased. The old father was also dead, along with the man's wife and children. Every single one of them was quietly contributing to their respective positions. There were no complaints, only unyielding tears. No one knew when the end would come. This was a battle for the survival of the race. There was no mercy, no surrender. Under such circumstances, the help of the Pantheon Temple was extremely precious. This was all because their commander betrayed the interests of the Alliance. One had to know that apart from the trolls, the elves that evolved from the trolls were considered natives. Strictly speaking, the humans and dwarves of the mainstream races of the Alliance were creations of the Titans. Even if Duque were to kneel down and lick the Titan's boots, no one would say anything. Who would have thought that Duque would be able to take the lead in the negotiations with the Titans? The strength of the Pantheon Temple had long been rooted in the hearts of the people. Just look at the Red Dragon army during the Second Battle of the Dark Portal. In that era, it was simply an unsolvable bug. Looking at those tall and sturdy guardians and watchmen, these giants that only existed in legends made it hard for people to even think of going against them. In the past 36 years, they would occasionally appear and help mortals, and they would be applauded by the entire city. No one dared to hope that these peerless masters who walked out of the legends would actually join the battle of the Alliance and become a part of the Alliance. This kind of unthinkable thing actually happened. In the frontline command of the Alliance in Naxxramas, the throne conference hall was also very lively. Wow. Is this really true? Duque, you're not lying to me, are you? Is the Titan's technology really open to the Alliance? Jurban almost jumped onto Duque's shoulder. In fact, the great gnome craftsman was standing on Magni Bronzebeard's crystal shoulder as he spoke to Duque. Duque bared his teeth. You've asked me dozens of times. I'm right. Don't let the scientists under you bite off more than they can chew. They have to slowly absorb knowledge bit by bit, integrate it, and make the technology ours. Yes. Understood. Happiness had come so suddenly that Jurban was simply overjoyed. As for the gnomes, who did not have strong combat power, although they also had many spellcasters, technology was the core of their strength. As for the dwarves, they would receive the forging skills of the Titans, which would undoubtedly allow the dwarves' forging skills to advance by leaps and bounds. The Dreenii would receive the Holy Titan magic inheritance. The Night Elves had the natural inheritance. The humans were the biggest, and basically had a share of all kinds of inheritance. As for the orcs, Tauren, trolls, Forsaken, Naga, Murlocs, and Bugmen, they could only receive a small amount of benefits from the humans. Status determined everything. For the time being, the mainstream races of the Alliance ate the meat, while they drank the soup. In the hall, there were also the humanoid Alexstrasza and Isra as witnesses. When the leaders saw the Red Dragon Queen and the Green Dragon Queen put on the Alliance's emblem on their pauldrons, everyone was extremely satisfied. Yo, you're my subordinate now. Come, smile for me. Duque teased Alexstrasza. The Red Dragon Queen was not in a good mood. She put her hands on her hips and pretended to be angry. Bastard! If you anger me, I'll bite you to death. Duque pulled Isra and Onyxia over, hugged their waists, and said in a threatening manner, "Teeth, who's afraid of who? I have 2 dragons on my side now." You bastard! Alexstrasza looked at the thick-skinned Onyxia, and then at her sister, who was too shy to raise her head. She really had no temper. Bastard! The Dragonsleep Temple is only temporarily under your command. The Red Dragon Queen was really mad. Thinking back to when she was in trouble, although she was grateful to Duque for saving her, that kind of gratitude was more like the charity of a high-ranking person to a low-ranking person. Who would have thought that in just 30 years, this kid would climb on top of her and piss on her head? Now that it was like this, if he really won this war, then she would probably be toyed to death. Just thinking about it made her feel that the future was dark. Hee, after the Burning Legion kneels, I have all the time to deal with you. Duque smirked. One of the parts of the agreement with the Pantheon was, if the people of Azeroth really joined forces with the Pantheon to defeat Sargeras and his Burning Legion according to the plan, then all the Guardians in Azeroth would be transferred to the Alliance. Strictly speaking, they would become Du's private armed forces. Chapter 2031. On the other side of the conference hall, little Anduin appeared as the Crown Prince. He asked his father, William, "Father, why did the Pantheon make such a huge concession?" The alliance itself, and even the whole of Azeroth, couldn't give the Pantheon a bargaining chip. The alliance is lucky to have Duque. If Sargeras was the bargaining chip, there was nothing the Pantheon wouldn't give. Indeed, Thul and the other Titans hated Sargeras to the core. Whether it was a personal grudge or a public one, getting rid of Sargeras was the only hope for the Pantheon to turn the tables. If they could kill Sargeras, a mere planet and some Titan creations that they could create as many as they wanted would be a free gift to the Pantheon. Since Duque showed that he had no intention of fighting for the hegemony of this universe, what was the point of giving the independence of a small planet that had contributed to the Pantheon? This was the difference in status, and the way of thinking was also different. What was a huge gain in the eyes of mortals was not even a drop in the ocean for a super tycoon like the Pantheon. Of course, to Duque, it was a huge gain. Isra, for example, would be bound by her duties for eternity without the orders of the Titans. It would be a huge loss if a dragon girl like her, who was bound by her career, were to be taken away by the Titans just like that. If that was the case, it might change from World of Warcraft to Era of the Massacre of the Gods. The addition of the Titans undoubtedly had a positive effect on the entire war. New vocation halls were being built one by one. The most interesting was the Sky Fortress, which had now become the frontline base of the Alliance and the vocation hall for warriors. Back then, Odin had been unhappy with Duque and regarded himself as the chief of the Guardians, acting like he was the #1 in the world. Now, the tables had turned, and Odin had actually become Duque's subordinate. Isra and the others were tongue-tied when they saw this. They still remembered that when Thul announced this decision, Odin's entire body seemed to have been petrified, and he froze on the spot. It was as if in the next moment, a gust of wind would blow him into dust and scatter him into nothingness. Just thinking about that face that looked as if his whole family had died was hilarious. "Oh, I'm thinking, could Odin have rebelled?" Torim said, "No, although Odin has a bad temper, he is still a standard guardian. Fulfilling his duty was his first priority. No matter how much he doesn't like you in private, he's a qualified guardian. This will never change." Isra chimed in, "That's right." And during this period, there was no need to worry about Odin falling. Now that the Pantheon was in charge of monitoring, the situation of every guardian would be promptly reported to Lord Unhulsur. At least on the guardian's side, nothing will happen to him. The fall of Nethario, the Wing of Death, and Loken, the King of Wisdom, was the result of the two ancient gods brainwashing over a long period of time, affecting their minds bit by bit, slowly distorting their wills. There wasn't a suitable environment, and there wasn't enough time. The Guardians were now absolutely reliable. On the other hand, Pantheon's assets in Azeroth were far richer than Duque had imagined. More than 1,000,000 Titan creations poured out of the various Titan ruins or fortresses. Damn it, I've been in Order for more than 20,000 years, and I never knew that there was such an army under Order. Mimiron looked as if he had seen a ghost. It was the storm giants lined up in a neat formation. They were half physical, half elemental creations similar to Alkavon. They had huge bodies that were 4 stories tall and had the power to control lightning. A large hole that was more than 1 kilometer long and wide opened up in what was supposed to be the mountainside of Otter. The giant legion that had been hiding inside for 25,000 years strode out with their heads held high. Countless oval-shaped spaceships similar to maglev spaceships carried them away at high speed. Under the deployment of the Alliance headquarters, they would join the front line against the burning legion. The feeling of having an abundant military force made every staff officer in the Alliance army happy. This was especially so when the Titans said that as long as the Titan factories were not destroyed, all of the Titan creations could be recycled indefinitely. The Alliance generals were overwhelmed by immense happiness. It would take at least a decade to nurture a qualified Alliance soldier. After more than a decade of growth, they would be carefully taught and trained in various combat techniques. When a soldier entered the battlefield, 10% of the Alliance recruits would die within 5 minutes of the start of the battle. If this was extended to the entire battle, the casualty rate of the recruits would often be 30%, or even higher. It was not that people could not die forever. Using the limited lives of the Azeroth people to fight against an infinite number of demons was originally a very unprofitable thing. Now, it was infinite against infinite, and shameless against shameless. The military power of the Pantheon Temple suddenly filled the entire front line. Things that looked like manned space rockets were launched into the sky from Otter, Oldham, and other Titan bases. They were portable bases. As long as there were dragons or their own people to cover them, the small metal bases of divine artifacts could find debris floating in the space orbit on their own, absorb it, and modify it. Now, almost every 24 hours, a space fortress with a diameter of no less than a kilometer would appear in the void battlefield. This greatly made up for the lack of air defense, and the interception of the Burning Legion's assault ships and planet destroyers had also reached a height that made the Burning Legion's flesh ache. Taking advantage of the greatly reduced pressure, the Alliance began to mobilize elite troops to attack the various important places in the Broken Islands. Blackheart Forest, Eye of Azhara, Fort Raven, Watchman's Cellar. Originally, these important places caused considerable trouble for the Alliance army in history. In just 3 days, the Alliance sent out elites led by second-tier heroes such as Lena Thunderspear to destroy them. There was an abundance of troops, so Duque made the decision to divide his forces. With William as the leader, he brought along his godfather, Wolf God Goldring, and other god of the wilderness, as well as half of the original Alliance heroes to attack the Night Fortress. As the core of the entire Surima city and even the Surima region, taking down the Night Fortress was equivalent to liberating the entire Surima. This would not be easy, because there were a total of 10 bosses in the Night Fortress, led by Ghoul Dan, who had snuck in from another timeline to cause trouble. Originally, everyone suggested that Duke fight steadily and steadily, fighting his way through. Duque refused. No. Don't be mistaken, even with the military power of the Pantheon, we are still at a disadvantage. The weak should have the awareness of the weak. While the Burning Legion has no new way to break the anti-Titan array, we have to make good use of this short period of local military strength to attack the core of the Legion. Chapter 2032. The above was just official language. The truth of the matter was that Duque was too arrogant. Who do you think you are, Gul'dan? Do you think you're worthy of me taking action personally? Well, Dan was still the demigod Ghoul, Dan who had received Kill Jaden's infusion of power. Duque might have given him an end for the sake of history. Unfortunately, this Gul'dan was not that Gul'dan. The original owner of the timeline had attempted to steal Sargeras' power after the second battle at the Dark Portal. When he opened the tomb of Sargeras, he was dismembered by the demons in the tomb. Under the premise that Duke had restrained most of the other timelines, this Gul'dan who came from some unknown corner of the timeline was really weak. He was a demigod after all, but his power was far from what Lin Li had imagined. Gul'dan's soul was inferior to other demigods, be it in terms of quality or quantity. The strength of one's soul determined the upper limit of a demigod. Gul'dan's upper limit? Even though it was only through the magician's eyes, Duque only had to glance at Gul'dan from afar to sentence him to death. The change in power destined the situation of the Night Fortress to be a laughable situation where the early bosses were strong and the final bosses were weak. There were a total of 10 bosses in the Night Fortress. After investigation, it was discovered that it was mainly made up of the fallen Night Elves and the demons of the army. The fallen Night Elves were the strongest magic swordsmen and constructs, while the army sent out the leader of the Dreadlord. Other than that, their respective leaders, the Grand Mages Alessandra and Gul'dan, were also among them. William was the most suitable opponent to deal with. In terms of magic, Duke had only left one helper, Kai Z, for William. Initially, Duque didn't want Kai Z to go. However, after thinking about it, he had spent more than 10 years to nurture William to where he was today. He could take charge of things on his own, and he had also broken the shackles of death. He couldn't possibly let William die here for no reason, right? If he, the commander of the Alliance, wanted to slack off and skip work, he needed someone with enough power and prestige to oversee the Alliance headquarters. Other than William, Duque really couldn't find a second candidate. When William brought half of the powerhouses to the hall next door to discuss the strategy for attacking the Night Fortress, Duque began to arrange the alliance's strategy. In the middle of Naxxrama's throne hall, there were several artifacts protected by complex magic arrays in the open space in the center of the field. They hovered in the air above the white jade throne. They were the pillars of creation that Olgeron had learned about when he visited the Observer. In the stormy fjord, William had gone deep into Odin's Valkyrie and obtained the shield of Agramma after a difficult trial. Varsala. Duque got the Tears of Elun in advance. After defeating the former god of the wilderness, Cenarius, who had fallen into a nightmare, he also saved Isra and played dragon taming. Azuna, Vashj led her men into the Eye of Azhara and found the tidal stone. In the highest mountain, Sar and the Tauren Bane and other chiefs joined forces to form an elite team. They walked the path of the Tauren heroes from 10,000 years ago and entered the Deathwing's lair again. They defeated the Underground King and obtained the Hammer of Kaz, Garoth. Now, the collection of the Pillars of Creation was nearing completion. Duque looked at the only empty jade pedestal. Only Serlama's Eye of Unforgettable is left. Jaina walked up and stroked her blonde hair. Where is it? It should be in the hands of Gul Dan of the Night Fortress. A few people frowned. Tyron said, "Didn't you say that we can only defeat the Burning Legion if we gather all the Pillars of Creation? Then why are we attacking Sargera's tomb so soon? Speaking of which, the leader inside should be very strong." Although he hid it well and pretended that there were no powerhouses inside, the one guarding the key position was Kill Jaden's main body. "I can't be wrong," Duque replied calmly. Shock was written on the faces of the remaining people. It was true that Duque had once led them to defeat Kill Jaden, but that was under the premise that Duque had used spatial magic to lock Kill Jaden and let the egg follow the Burning Legion's tradition. Its lower body was stuck in the toilet bowl. He was completely bullying the egg, which was why he was able to kill Jaden in one fell swoop. Even if Duque's power had increased greatly, how much courage did he have to take the initiative to attack Sargera's tomb without all the Pillars of Creation? Queen Sylvanas stood out. She lightly clenched her left fist against her waist, and her right hand hung naturally. She puffed out her chest and looked at Duque in the eye. This kind of attack is a little irresponsible. Our strongest people are often the leaders of a country or a race. If we attack Sargera's tomb early, our command system will also become sluggish. You know that the Burning Legion's requirements for command are much lower than ours. Give me a reason why we have to do this. Queen Sylvanas was right. The attack of the Legion, except for the core main force, was more like the Legion setting a general target and then letting the lords below rush up and attack blindly. Anyway, there were many mountains inside the Legion, and each Void Lord was a mountain. The demons under him weren't afraid of death. At most, after dying, they would roll back to the twisting nether to resurrect and run their corpses. It was a battle of attrition. But the Alliance couldn't fight like this. Even with a large number of Titan creations as battlefield consumables, overall, the Alliance was still at a disadvantage in terms of military strength. The leaders of the Alliance knew that the sooner the war ended, the better, but they couldn't be so reckless. Duque smiled. "It's nothing. It's just because the commander of Sargera's tomb is Kill Jaden. Don't think that Kill Jaden is full of schemes, powerful, cunning, and vengeful. Sometimes, his strength is also his greatest weakness. Back in the Sunwell, I tricked him. That guy is always thinking of setting me up once. This is a battle between the wise." Queen Sylvanas suddenly understood. Kill Jaden was very strong himself. Compared to Archimonde, who was also not weak and had a rash personality, Kill Jaden preferred to use intelligence to solve problems. But this time, Kill Jaden was obviously going against a brick wall. Since Kill Jaden's arrival was confirmed, it could be deduced that in order to ambush Duque, Kill Jaden had chosen to hide in secret. If he could trick Duque, then he would naturally take revenge on him. The problem was that Duque knew that Kill Jaden was there, so would he still go in? Of course, the Alliance would be happy to see the egg turn off the entire Burning Legion's command system. But the egg wasn't stupid. When he found that Duque didn't take the bait, he would naturally jump out and take control of the situation. This wasn't the situation the Alliance wanted. Duque smirked and said in Queen Sylvanas' ear, "I'm just going to do it." Chapter 2033. I'm just rubbing. As a member of Duque's harem, how could they not know that Duque's next sentence was, "I'm not going in"? All of a sudden, all of Duque's women burst out laughing. "I'm just rubbing, I'm not going in." This was the biggest lie exclusive to men in the world. He said he wasn't going in, but he still went in the end. Duque's description was simply terrible. Only the hoof was dumbfounded and couldn't turn the corner. Jaden is a male, right? Could it be? Duque suddenly felt despair. Metaphor. This is just a metaphor. My sexual orientation is normal. Back to business. Everyone understood that Duque was going to launch a feint attack and not a feint. If they ignored the tomb of Sargeras for too long, Jaden would jump out and reorganize the chaotic Burning Legion, bringing heavy pressure to the Allied army. It wasn't appropriate to go all out now because the pillars of creation were not complete. If they couldn't fight, they would fall into the egg trap. So Duque would put on an all-out attack to suppress the tomb of Sargeras' demon army. However, the real attack depended on Duque. More accurately, it depended on the progress of the Night Stronghold's attack. Once Dan was killed, it would be time for the attack. After deciding on the general direction, how to carry it out was up to the various leaders. As the commander, Duque was the helmsman. The following details would naturally be handled by the leaders and the various staff officers, as well as the marshals and generals. Coming out of the throne room, Duque suddenly felt a little tired. It was mental. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't nervous to negotiate with a super powerful being like Sir in one go. Because he had already done the best he could, the fatigue was also the greatest. Duque returned to his official residence in Naxxramas. Unexpectedly, Aurelia was already waiting there. "What's the matter?" "No, I just wanted to comfort you. Don't put too much pressure on yourself." The mature, steady, and infinitely gentle female elf gave her lover a very comfortable smile. Aurelia led Duque to the chaise longue in the bedroom and let Duque lie on her plump thighs. She skillfully cleaned Duque's ears. "You know me the best. You can tell that I'm tired." Feeling the smoothness and elasticity of the elf's thigh on his face, Duque let out a moan of comfort. "Don't forget, I'm your first woman." Aurelia deftly used a cotton swab to tickle Duque's ear. "Is there a lot of pressure?" "Of course it is. I'm carrying the fate of the entire planet on my shoulders. You know, I can see a lot of things. But I'm always afraid, what if I'm wrong? Even if you have the strongest foresight in Azeroth and the strongest combat ability. Don't forget, everyone doesn't exist alone in this world." "Huh. You always think that the fate of the soldiers and people of the Alliance will change because of your decisions. But you and the millions of people of the Alliance, didn't you also come this far because of the decisions of your predecessors? Everyone has to be responsible for their own decisions. Since everyone recognizes your decision and elects you as the commander of the Alliance. Then whether you succeed or fail, this is something that everyone has to face together. It's not your personal success, nor your personal failure." Aurelia continued to persuade him. "But I'm still a little scared. The more you have, the more you're afraid of losing. Maybe that's how I feel." Duque smiled bitterly. "I think being scared is actually a good thing. It proves that you are not arrogant, still have humility, and still have a heart of fear for the world. I think only this kind of leader is the most perfect leader." Activating his divine vision, Duque's vision transcended space. He quietly watched the sky outside Naxxramas, watching the unpredictable flowing clouds under the sky. At this moment, a string in his heart was faintly stirred. There seemed to be a lot of figures and things appearing in front of him. It was the heroes of Azeroth who should have died long ago in history, and the kingdoms that had long been destroyed. The powerful alliance now, the revived kingdoms, were more like illusions in the long river of history. Now, Duque seemed to see two histories with the same foundation, but completely different results, overlapping with each other. A gust of wind blew out of nowhere, bringing with it the aura of the past, mixed with the debris that flowed out from today's war. It gathered together in a frenzy, turning into a torrent of storms that traversed the sky, charging into the future. Duque suddenly understood something. Do your best, leave your fate to fate, and have a clear conscience. If you win, you have a harem all over the world. If you lose, you take your wives and run away. It was that simple. Duque was comfortable. And Duque's sword was also active. Even though Aurelia was an old married couple, she couldn't help blushing. After thinking about it, she put the sword back into its scabbard. 3 days later, the Alliance launched the largest attack in history on the tomb of Sargera's area. With the 3 major flying fortresses, Naxxramas, Dalajan, and Sky Fortress as the core, more than 10,000 flying ships, 100,000 tanks and armored vehicles of various types, 300,000 Titan creations, and 3 million Alliance soldiers, all pressed towards the tomb of Sargeras. Looking at the magnified optical image on the screen of the command post, Duque was filled with emotion. The tomb of Sargeras looked like an ancient building standing on a hill full of traces of seaweed. Next to the huge square brick road full of moss stood a semicircular arch decoration. It looked no different from other ancient ruins in Azeroth. Not many people knew that Sargeras's huge remains were buried under the ruins that covered a vast area. Long before the first year of the Dark Portal, when Aegwynn was still the guardian of Azeroth, Sargeras came to Azeroth again. Sargeras didn't appear in his original body, only part of his avatar. His target seemed to be Aegwynn, wanting to destroy her and open the way for the Burning Legion's invasion. The result was the opposite. He was defeated by Aegwynn, just like Archimonde on Mount Hyjal today, who died there. But unlike Archimonde, whose brain was mostly muscles, Sargeras was faking his defeat for his own plan. He could directly destroy all the planets in the universe, but he couldn't do anything to Azeroth. The active protective magic circle left by the Pantheon weakened him, and the stronger his own power, the more difficult it was to enter the world of Azeroth. Therefore, when fighting Aegwynn, his own power was very weak. After defeating Sargeras' avatar, Aegwynn was worried that if the huge body was left alone, it might cause more terrible consequences. But destroying it might release the nightmarish evil power within. Chapter 2034. Aegwynn finally summoned an island from the bottom of the sea. There was a long-sunken night elf building on the island. She buried the body of Sargeras' incarnation in this building, and used the powerful power given to her by the Tirisfal Council to seal the remaining power in Sargeras' body here forever. This building full of night elf civilization buried the ancient secrets of Quell, Dorii. Aegwynn understood the mysterious power of the night elves. She used magic to protect the island so that no race could enter, and then she sank the island to the bottom of the sea again. She hoped to use this method to prevent mortals who were obsessed with power from finding this body, and then let this power harm the world. Unfortunately, later, people kept coming to break Aegwynn's magic. The ones who came were more and more formidable. First, it was Dan of this world who broke the magic circle, and then he was torn to pieces by the demons who lingered in the cemetery because of Sargeras' evil energy. Then it was Illidan, Dan's skull, Eye of Sargeras, and so on. Then it was the time point of Return of the Legion, where Dan appeared again in another time point, and now the main force of the Burning Legion. In the sky, countless rays of light traversed the entire sky. Those were hundreds of thousands of cannons of the Alliance. The rumbling sound of the cannons made the entire sky seem to be filled with thunderclouds, and there was lightning and thunder every moment. Large-caliber naval cannons and heavy railway guns were the main melody of the battlefield. From time to time, it was mixed with the crisp sound of medium and small-caliber cannons, often dealing with the Burning Legion's air force that risked their lives to attack. Once the cannonballs engraved with holy light runes hit the demons, they would hit a small area of rain mixed with broken limbs and dirty demon blood in the sky. Countless demons rushed over, and when they broke into the short-range air defense circle of the Alliance fleet with all their strength, they would hit the short-range air defense circle formed by the Pentashade dragons, Wagri, and other Titan creations. That was the most cruel, bloody battle. Often, a face-to-face encounter, and a fresh life would disappear from the world. The demons were endless, and if the falling dragons didn't die on the spot, they could still be saved. The Dead Alliance warriors, in addition to becoming the Forgotten, had a new choice, and that was to become Odin's Wagri. The allied army was attacking fiercely, and the Burning Legion was not to be outdone. Almost every hour, there were 100,000 new demons joining the battle. That kind of cruel meat grinder-like battle made every soldier who participated in this war tremble in fear. However, the Burning Legion and Titan had simultaneously increased the number of troops they sent in, causing the Alliance's losses to be within an acceptable range. Within Naxxramas, Aurelia, who was standing beside Duque, said softly, "The resistance of the army is very fierce. Of course, it would be too fake if we could easily kill our way into Sargera's tomb. If you didn't know that Jaden was inside, even I would have fallen for it." Sasha put down her role as a mother for the first time in a long time. She was also dressed in military attire and stood beside Duque. Duque shrugged. "The tomb of Sargeras is huge, but it can't accommodate 100,000 human soldiers. We can't completely destroy the tomb and forcefully excavate it. This means that we can only send in a small number of elite experts. This guy Egg is very calculative. As long as the Alliance's elite team, including me, enters the tomb, more than 10,000 elite demons with strength comparable to that of a Void Lord will jump out and block all possible reinforcements." The three Windrunner sisters were all wearing cloaks and revealing battle armor. In order to pursue agility and speed, they had completely given up on defense. Queen Sylvaner stood up and looked at the three sisters. No matter what, they were very eye-catching. Queen Sylvaner said, "By the way, do you have a spy in the army who sends you messages?" Jaden is such a smart guy. As long as he has a little suspicion, he will directly kill his subordinates. The betrayal of the Eridar twins this time provoked him quite a bit. Queen Sylvaner rolled her eyes. "Then how do you know how many elites Jaden has hidden?" "Please, back in the ancient war, I was the one who opened the portal to Azeroth for Sargeras. Those guys, after a whole 10,000 years, their spatial technology hasn't improved at all. They didn't even find the little backdoor I hid inside. Who can they blame?" Duque looked speechless. It's fun to be mischievous." Beside him, Tyrant couldn't take it anymore and pretended to be angry. "I knew you were an accomplice too." Duque looked desperate. "Queen Azhara is courting death. How can you blame me? If I don't open the portal, someone like Savi's will open it." After the small talk, Duque turned his attention to the army. Looking at the formation of the army, Duque frowned. Sometimes it's not a good thing to have too many subordinates. This was an awkward topic. In the past, when Duque played games like the Three Kingdoms, every general had a limit to the number of troops he could lead. At first, Duque didn't understand. Later, he realized that a general's talent determined how many troops he could lead. Anything more than that would only make things worse. In the Alliance, there weren't many leaders who had the talent to lead. Compared to the Alliance's current army, which had a total of 10 million soldiers, there were too few qualified commanders. Those who could be called generals were even rarer. After more than 30 years, there were still a few marshals who could lead less than 100,000 people. For example, Taylor, Bridget, Darian, Kilfitz, and the others. Those who could lead hundreds of thousands of troops were only Duque, William, Magni, Tyrant, Queen Sheila, and Jaina. Duke and William were the only ones who weren't too messy at the million-dollar level. Now that there were 3 million troops, it was basically up to Duque to deploy them using the system. From logistics to troop deployment, Duque took care of everything. That was why everything looked so orderly. If the Burning Legion had the ability to launch an all-out attack, there would definitely be a defensive area that would collapse due to the lack of ability of the commander. There was nothing that could be done about a commander who had come from the era of cold weapons. At times like this, Duque felt that he didn't have enough helpers around him. Just as Duque was feeling troubled, he suddenly laughed. "Ha! You bastards! Are you finally willing to come back?" Stormwind, Goldflash City in the Elven Forest. As an important city in Stormwind and even the Alliance, it had developed into a first-tier city in the past decade. With the war in full swing, millions of tons of food, ammunition, and other strategic resources were transported from all over the Elven Forest to Stormwind Port. From the extremely busy port, they were transported to the front lines of the Broken Islands. Chapter 2035. Suddenly, there was a disturbance in space, and a huge portal the size of a football field appeared in the Fargady Mines, south of Goldflash City. In the first year of the Dark Portal, this was a copper mine filled with kobolds. Now that the copper mine had been mined out, it had become an important tank production base for Stormwind. When a few beggars stumbled out of the portal, they were shocked to find themselves surrounded. They're not demons. Be careful, they might be the fallen. Don't be silly. How can there be holy knights among the fallen? The few people who were surrounded by more than 5,000 fully armed soldiers and professionals with airplanes and cannons were also dumbfounded. There were helicarriers hovering in the air, destroyers with their cannons open, and tanks slowly moving with black smoke billowing out. Everything was so unfamiliar. Is this the Alliance? That's the emblem of the Alliance, right? A beggar asked another beggar. Their standard language made the soldiers of Stormwind relax a little. A holy knight in red armor walked forward and approached a lieutenant who was obviously the leader of the Alliance. Hello. You're the captain of the Alliance of Stormwind, right? The captain noticed that there was a golden lion's head on the holy knight's shoulder plate, as well as a huge golden hexagram that took up almost half of the epaulette. Although it was old and a little broken, the insignia of the Alliance's military rank had not been changed in the past few decades. The captain shivered and immediately saluted, reporting to Lord Marshal, "I'm Captain Mexes Crandolph of the Fargady military sector. May I know your name, Lord Marshal?" That's great. It seems like the Alliance has been doing well while we were away. Hello, Captain. I'm the former Marshal of the Alliance, Abendis. I'm not sure if you've heard of us. If you're Marshal Alfred Abendis, then the people behind you are Chairman Ronan, Turalian, and Marshal Sadan Dathrahan? Crandolph shouted excitedly. You know us? Marshal Abendis was stunned. Of course, you're the heroes of the Alliance. His voice caused an uproar in the crowd. The soldiers reacted quickly. They stood at attention and shouted in unison, "Heroes of the Alliance, you have worked hard." Those beggar-like guys suddenly felt their throats choking. He had wandered for so many years on that godforsaken planet that was like a land of exile and suffered so much. But now, it seemed that it was all worth it. The four old fellows couldn't help but burst into tears. At this moment, the sky suddenly brightened. Another portal opened on the scene. Unlike before, this portal didn't startle the soldiers. When the portal opened, the first thing that appeared was the Alliance's lion head symbol. There weren't many existences who could casually open a teleportation gate. This was the privilege of Pharaoh, who was at least at the Radiant Moon realm. In the Alliance, the only person who had a lion's head with the symbol of the 7 stars accompanying the moon was the Alliance's commander, Duke Marcus. If it was really Abendis and the others who went missing, it wouldn't be strange for the commander of the Alliance to be alerted. The portal suddenly opened wide. A fiery red figure suddenly pounced out. Even though it had been almost 20 years, Alfred could still recognize the other party at a glance. His expression instantly changed from shock to boundless joy. Baby, poor old father. The smile on Alfred's face instantly froze because his precious daughter, Bridget Abendis, actually didn't see him at first. Instead, she rushed past him and with a flying leap, hugged Ronan who was beside him. Thank the heavens, you really didn't die. Without any nonsense, Bridget, who was still dressed in military attire and had clearly just returned from the battlefield, kissed Ronan fiercely just like that. From the 24th year of the Door of Darkness when she was sucked into the void, to the 36th year of the Door of Darkness, Alfred had spent a whole 12 years thinking about his daughter. He had fantasized countless times. If his daughter was well, what would she say to him when they met again? Who knew that this would be the outcome? An old father's entire body was petrified. A gust of wind blew, and suddenly, the goddess-gazing stone was weathered. His entire body turned into something like cotton and dissipated with the wind. In the next instant, filled with rage, the old father decided he couldn't die yet. Alfred immediately came back to his senses and blasted out a son-in-law death punch, filled with rage. Ronin! A thunderous roar shook Ronin silly. In the next second, Ronin was struck by old Abendis' left hook with a dumbfounded look on his face. That face with a big scar on his nose, which wasn't too handsome in the first place, was instantly deformed by the heavy blow. First, he was forcefully kissed, then he was attacked by a comrade who had gone through thick and thin with him for more than 10 years. Ronin had no idea what was going on. He was dumbfounded. There's nothing wrong with this. Bastard, I've been your brother for the past 12 years, and you actually flirted with my daughter? Alfred was furious. Then, a small red fist rapidly enlarged in his field of vision. A certain old father was beaten up by the traitorous girl. Dad, how could you just beat up Ronin without saying anything? Bullshit. Didn't you also beat me up? He could think of it that way, but looking at his daughter whose heart had been completely stolen, Alfred was in despair. In the end, the two men covered their faces and groaned on the ground. The current Alliance Marshal, the leader of the Scarlet Cross Army, Bridget, who was known as the Bloody Tyrannosaurus, had her hands on her hips as she stood in the middle of the battlefield. This was the rhythm of the entire battlefield. At the side, countless soldiers were dumbfounded. The Alliance Marshal had beaten up the former Dalajan Kirin Tor, and now the Alliance Marshal had been beaten up by another Alliance Marshal. If it wasn't for the invasion of the Burning Legion, this kind of miraculous domestic violence incident would definitely make the headlines of the Azeroth Daily. On the side, Turalian and Cyan Dathrahan were laughing heartily without any sense of shame. No one had expected to encounter such an interesting incident as soon as they came back. Cough cough. Duque arrived and scolded those brats with a stern face. What are you all standing there for? All soldiers, return to your posts. You are forbidden to discuss this matter in public. Not in public? Then in private, kihi. Thousands of people covered their mouths and held back their laughter as they ran away. Duque didn't care about the Abendis family's trivial matter. Instead, he walked in front of the other two old paladins. Duque opened his arms. Old brothers, welcome back. Chapter 2036. Turayan and Saidan were stunned. It wasn't that they didn't recognize Duque. On the contrary, it was because they knew Duque that they found him unfamiliar. When they disappeared, Duque was already playing with immortality. What was unfamiliar was the natural elemental waves that overflowed from Duque's body. What? Didn't you guys secretly train for 12 years and become legendary heroes? Can't I step into the realm of gods and become a peak demigod? Duque said with a smile. Don't worry, the alliance is better now than it was before you left. Duque swept his gaze over the 4 big shots, and the smile on his face grew brighter. Was the look in his eyes when he saw a strong man. Who knew? Maybe you've received the news, maybe you haven't. Right now, the Burning Legion is launching a general attack on Azeroth. Azeroth needs your strength and wisdom more than ever. They have been out of touch for more than a decade. Actually, we don't mind starting from the bottom, Turayan said frankly. Before the 4 returned, they were indeed a little worried that they wouldn't have a position when they came back. They even thought that if there was a war, they would be willing to be veterans. Seeing the unfamiliar new flying battleships, tanks, and helicopters around them, they felt that they had entered the wrong era. Duque laughed. Sorry. The Scarlet Cross has expanded into 2 armies with 800,000 people. I even caught Mograine. That old guy cursed all day long, saying that I ruined his life. Do you think the Alliance and I will let you work for us as small soldiers? Duque's words stunned the 4 for a moment. Soon they knew why. A coquettish, handsome, and strong Gavin Radbad Luck jumped out of the portal. A slightly embarrassed Tyrion Fordring followed, rubbing the back of his head awkwardly. Then, a young, handsome, and suave Alexandros Mograine appeared. The three of them were obviously 18 years old, when their bodies were at their strongest. *CK. After following Duque for more than a decade, Dan had long learned Duque's curse. Turalian was also stunned. Compared to his two old friends who were also part of the 5 Silver Sages, he and Dan were simply old men. Marshal Abendis also had a strange expression on his face. *CK. His old partner was actually younger than his future son-in-law. The group of people gathered together and couldn't help but recall the scene 36 years ago when they followed their master, Alonsis Fail, to meet Duque. Old friends who had been separated for more than 10 years naturally had a lot to talk about. I don't want to return to my youth either. It's against the laws of nature. However, Duque used the survival of the human race to reason with me. When I heard, is the survival of all the humans on this planet more important? Or is your damned idea of not liking unnatural immortality more important? I admit defeat. On the other side, Abendis was not as sentimental as the first Holy Knight. Although he was being pulled away by old Mograine, he would occasionally look in the direction his daughter and Ronan had left. Bridget dragged the dumbfounded Ronan to the dormitory of a certain female officer. "Lieutenant, I've temporarily requisitioned your room. Go stand guard. No one is allowed to approach this floor. I need to discuss something important with Breaking Dawn Mage Ronan." The female lieutenant nodded like a chick pecking at rice and ran off to disperse the crowd. Bridget was a marshal. She couldn't afford to offend her. Ronan still hadn't recovered from the shock. It was not easy for him to find a stellar solar wind near that damn desolate planet, which caused the surrounding space-time turbulence to pause for a while, and he seized the opportunity to bring the 3 brothers back. Only after returning did he realize that 12 years had passed. Then, Bridget, whom he once had feelings for, had turned from an 18-year-old girl to a 30-year-old woman. She even looked like she wouldn't marry anyone but him. Although he had dreamt of Bridget's sincere smile every night for the past 10 years, this was too dreamy. "Bridget, I thought you were already. I didn't marry anyone. After you disappeared, I didn't want anyone. I just waited for you. I firmly believe that you won't die," Bridget said firmly. "But we weren't lovers before." Bridget didn't say anything. She pushed Ronan onto the female lieutenant's bed and gave her CPR. Her green eyes stared straight at Ronan. "We are now." But Lord Abendis suddenly said to marry you. I feel like it's a bit fast." "Fast? It's been 12 years. Something that made Ronan speechless happened. Bridget actually started breaking armor. In just 10 seconds, all 5 layers of armor were maxed out, and her armor value dropped to 0. Ronan swallowed his saliva. "What about now?" The blonde marshal sat proudly on the mage and looked down at him. After being single for 12 years, Asao could compete with Diao-chan. Moreover, Bridget was already very beautiful and she took good care of herself. Ronan had fallen. On the other side, an hour had passed after they had finished talking about business. Duke returned to Naxxramas with a smirking Sin, a slightly embarrassed Turayan, Alfred, who became a father-in-law as soon as he came back, and Ronan, whose arms were wrapped around by a blissful Bridget and whose legs were weak when he walked. Duque first introduced the 4 to the Alliance leaders. At the same time, they were deeply shocked. There were so many new races in the Alliance? *CK. The Horde was dead, and even Sar and Wajin were in the Alliance? They were shocked, but what really moved them was that the Alliance still trusted them. After basic checks to prove that they hadn't been brainwashed by the Burning Legion, they were all given important tasks. Abendis and Sidon went to the Scarlet Cross to control a new army of 400,000 people. This army would participate in the general attack on Sargera's tomb. Bridget was originally the commander-in-chief of this army, but unfortunately, she wasn't capable enough. It was a bit messy when fighting, so her father and Sidon were suitable. Once Ronan returned, he immediately took control of the Dalajan mage squad. Kai Z gladly gave up his position because he was already too busy with the fire elementals. As for Turayan, Duque first brought Aurelia over. "I forgot to tell you, I'm married to Aurelia. We have a daughter, Enilis, who's almost 10. Turayan didn't know and kept congratulating Duque. He didn't know if Duque had been too close to Izura recently, but Izura had been led astray by Xianxia. Recently, he often looked for Duque and used popping candy to play Desert Storm. Duque's vision was a bit blurry. He saw that Lilian's head was clearly white, but it was dyed with a green light. So, starting a harem was bad. He would probably be stuck in it for the rest of his life. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.